let's get on with the meeting, shall we? Let me put my agenda up.
Rabina,
yes,
we are now live.
Oh, we
just
are
wanted
live.
to make that.
Right. Okay, well, my apologies, sincere apologies to everybody this morning that I've had a technical hiccup. A very good morning to all of you. Thank you for joining at such late notice online. We've done so because of the weather conditions, and we wanted to make sure that we were quiet to meet when we did. I understand, I want to make this point, that many of our colleagues across our services in the community and in all our care settings do not have this option. They continue to deliver exceptional care and support to patients, service users and carers, often under immense pressure. This is particularly evident as patients present with greater acuity, respiratory challenges and increasing complex needs. So I want to take a moment just to pause and to acknowledge their selflessness, their resilience, and express our deepest thanks to them for their dedication, which inspires us all and ensures our system of care giving continues to serve those who need it most. I think it's a really important point to illustrate, particularly in this very difficult weather conditions. I know that there are members of the Council of Governors, new members who have joined the meeting today, so a very warm welcome to you. Thank you for making the time to join us. And of course, we need now we'll have to try and catch up. If you please forgive me. We'll move straight in then to the colleague story. Gertie will introduce this month's colleague story, and I believe Paula Baker from the Divisional Managing Director Service, Adult Community Services and Hospital HB Division will join Gertie to present this item. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Chair. And Paula really needs very little introduction. The fabulous work she and the team have done improving their performance year on year for the last 4 years speaks to itself. So I won't take up Paula's time because her story is so much more important than listening to me. Over to you, Paula, and thank you for coming today.
Okay. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. So first of all, just to thank you for inviting me to share a positive colleague engagement story from Oldham Community Division. As you said, my name's Paula Baker. I'm the Divisional Managing Director, and I'm here on behalf of the division. So just to give you some context, our story began back in 2019, following TUPE into the organisation, after which we went quite quickly into the pandemic. Coming out of this, colleagues were telling us that they felt quite new into the organisation and a little distant due to COVID restrictions, and also being community-based. And thank you for referencing the working environment of the community division. As you know, this last week we've been out in snow and fog, so quite a different context from some colleagues within the organisation. So you can see from the data in 2021 that the staff survey response rate was 50%, with a pattern of steady pickup of response rate throughout the survey period. However, it was quite clear that there was a variation in engagement and perception from service to service and individual to individual around the value of taking the time to respond to the survey. You can see that we've been able to build on this year on year, culminating in an over 75% response rate this year, with a 20% response in week 1, which is doubling that of previous years and hitting 50% at week 4. So I wanted to just talk a little bit around how we've collectively achieved this as a division. So after that first year, we undertook quite a significant period of reflection and listening to our staff, so taking on board the results that we received, but also really importantly going out to speak to teams, both those with a high and those with a low response rates, to understand why, recognising that we weren't hearing from 50% of colleagues, which may skew our results and therefore be of less value than taking the whole picture on board. So we've then focused on 2 key areas really. So firstly, by making the staff survey a key people priority for the division, with an all year round focus for everyone. So not just picking this up a month before the survey comes out. And that's led to a cultural shift of expectation and accountability around staff survey and action in the results. So secondly, we've transferred our learning into our annual objectives and planning cycle as part of our divisional people plan. And so that feedback informs our service improvement that then can be measured in the year ahead. And it may be that some actions run right across the year and sometimes overlapping into years. So I think it's really important that you have that continuous improvement focus. So in terms of cultural shift, just to note this year, as the senior leadership team in the division, we haven't been out specifically to staff during the survey period to prompt them to respond. It's entirely been managed by the service leads and colleagues themselves, showing that they want to contribute to the staff survey. We've also made good use of the technology, so using that dashboard as active support, and I think that's introduced a little bit of a friendly competitive edge. We've got an established routine in relation to the staff survey. So once we receive the results, we analyse them internally. We really get down into that detail of the sub-levels and individual questions. We prepare a roadshow that the senior leadership team go out and deliver. So that involves sharing the results, both at NCA, care organisation and divisional level, themes and sub-themes. We suggest some actions and priorities for discussion, and then we build that action plan with staff. We also focus on a you said we did, so that we get that reflection on what we did the previous year and what the impact of that was. We then share that final plan, add to our divisional overall plan, and we action it throughout the year. So I guess just to give you a flavour in terms of that for this year, so the 2024 year, our people promise had a positive variance compared to the NCA. Our lower end of the results were around staff morale and learning. We looked at the sub-themes. We found those really useful in sort of highlighting themes. So there's a negative variance for appraisal, which is interesting because our compliance is high, but the value that staff feel is quite low. Our health and safety climate, burnout and work pressure. And that took us down to specific questions that we wanted to focus on. So things like targeting behaviours of an unwanted sexual nature, the number of unpaid hours staff are doing, work-related stress and staffing. Positively, they're against the same sub-themes. We have some positive variants in some of our areas, so specifically allied health professionals, podiatry and urgent care response. So again, that's given us another learning opportunity to go to those staff groups to say, what are they doing differently? Why is their experience different? So our 2024 priorities are around thinking around leaving and targeting exit interviews. Wellbeing, so one of our district nurse students has linked into the SCARF project and introduced a community app that can be used while driving around mindfulness, some protected time for one-to-ones and focusing on appraisal preparation. And we've done a specific focus group linking into the top team around appraisal, deep dive into quality of PDPs, linking into the trust objectives, thinking about the role and responsibilities in preparation for appraisals for both the appraisee, which is quite a focus this year, as well as appraiser and appraiser training. We've got a checklist SOP around sexual harassment, wellbeing, and we've introduced the active bystander scheme. So for each of the years, we've done that in terms of, just to give you a flavour, 2021-22, we focused on flexible working, divisional staff awards, listening lunches. 22-23, we focused on highlighting vacancies internally before they're advertised, active recruitment and retention, and our vacancy rate is now low. Appraisal training for leaders and flexible working for staff. Just to finally comment on sort of triangulation with our other people metrics. So I think it's important to take it in the round. So as I said, our my time compliance is quite high, it's 92%, but we're focusing on the quality. mandatory training at 96%. We've done quite a lot of work around compliance with accelerated leadership and engagement with that validation process. And we've got a very active group of cultural ambassadors and increasing focus on our res and des data. Just wanted to nod to the Todd team, who we share ideas with regularly, and we use them as a resource in the division, and thanks to them as well for their support. So I think that's all I've got to say.
Thank you so much, Paul. That's really appreciated. I'm going to ask my colleagues if they have any comments they'd like to make. Judith, your hand is up.
Yeah, I just want to say while Paula's here that actually for Paula as a leader, this is not just about the staff survey, and Paula's division is the first division to achieve a green SAS for the division, with every single service line underneath it achieving green status for its service accreditation system. And I think that talks to Paula's leadership across a whole range of things that are driven by engaging the staff and leading them and setting priorities. And being purposeful in the things that we're doing. So I didn't want Paula to leave the board today without recognising that her achievements not just around staff survey, but actually about how she is leading that division and all the services that sit within it, that is all achieved a green SAS status.
Thank you, Jude, and very well said and supported, I'm sure, by all colleagues on the board. Aziz?
Thank you, Chair. Paula, it is fantastic to hear about the work you're doing. And it doesn't surprise me at all that all your areas are green, like Judith just said, because what you're doing is focusing on staff, their development, their well-being. You've demonstrated really clearly how seriously you take the staff survey and all the bits you talked about in terms of listening to what the staff said and taking action. You know, this is an example for the whole of the NCA of how we should behave. And I'm just so heartened as chair of the People Committee and as a member of the board, I'm just so heartened to hear that we have managers like you who are really care about our staff and know that it's through their well-being, their development, their appraisal conversations that we can, you know, achieve better services for all our patients and service users. So thank you very much, and please keep it up. I know it's not easy.
Thank you.
Thank you, Aziz and Jude. Can I just add then a couple of comments, Paula, because I think, as we've heard already, this does require sustained leadership, and leadership that is compassionate and caring and inspires others through the way you engage and the way that you approach the teams who have to deliver on this really tight and difficult, historically challenging agenda. I mean, the fact that you've raised increased participation to 75% and above is absolutely incredible and very much appreciated. And as Aziz has just said, one cannot underestimate how much work you put in to achieve that. I think I'm really taken by the way you illustrated how you've delivered the programme of work, and the emphasis that this is not just about improving numbers. It is about ensuring that every staff member feels valued and included, and that the experiences shape the organisation's future. And by embedding that kind of staff engagement protocol and purposefulness into everyday operations, you know, you set a standard for how we can drive change and sustain that change and improve inclusivity and enhance workforce satisfaction, which does align perfectly, it's already been said, with our mission to care for and inspire our people. So thank you very much indeed for the work that you're doing and you'll continue to do on our behalf. Please accept our gratitude to you and to the team. And the investment you make in our people is the investment we make in you, and give thanks and appreciation for that. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, colleagues, we will now move then to the formal aspects of the agenda, taking first of all apologies for absence. Mrs. Lorna Allen, Chief Digital and Information Officer, has given her apologies, and I'm pleased to say that Miss Paula Markham, Associate Director of Application Services, will be representing Lorna, so a very warm welcome to you. We also have apologies from Miss Rachel Jones, one of our non-executive directors. Can I move to agenda item number 4, declarations of interest? Are there any declarations of interest colleagues would like to note that compromise them in any of the discussions this morning? I can see no hands, so thank you. We will move on. Agenda item number 5, the minutes of our previous meeting held on the 6th of November 2024. May I receive confirmation or otherwise from the board members that the drafted minutes from the boards represent an accurate record of our discussion on that day?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. Craig, you have your hand up.
Yeah, just a minor correction, Chair. There's on page 4, second paragraph, 4th sentence reads, scanning had been undertaken against cash situation. That should read capital situation, not cash situation. But I'll drop that through to Jay. Thank you very much, Craig. So with that amendment, can we now confirm that it is an accurate record of the meeting? You can just show me your hand, say yes. It's an important approval to note. Thank you, colleagues. Are there any other matters arising other than those listed within the report that board members would like to raise? I haven't received any, so I'm assuming that there are none. Okay, we will continue then. Agenda item number 7, the action tracker. The updated action tracker is provided for review by the board. Are there any questions that the board wants to raise? And is the board content with the action tracker as it is presented? I'm assuming that's all okay, so we'll move on then to the next agenda item. That is agenda item 8, and following that there'll be agenda item 9. As you will note, colleagues, both the integrated performance reports and the board assurance framework have been included as an early item for discussion on the agenda. These key documents are central to our governance framework, serving as the roadmap that informs the board's work and that of its delegated subcommittees. The integrated performance report provides a comprehensive view of key performance metrics, while the board assurance framework highlights the principal risk and mitigating actions required to achieve our strategic objectives. All of this is familiar to you. And as is this point I'm going to make now, that the board has delegated responsibility to its subcommittees to ensure due diligence in monitoring risk, overseeing the implementation of mitigating actions, and triangulating data and assurances across various reports, including the Change Portfolio Board. This ensures we remain aligned with our commitment to delivering safe, high quality and timely care. And at this point in the discussion, we focused on identifying any gaps or assurance that is further required, not addressed already in the subcommittees, which have been delegated to you to provide that wider, robust monitoring and scrutiny of our standards and performance. So that's why we have them both as agenda items at the beginning. I don't intend that we take detailed discussion here because we'll unpack some of that in the reports as we progress through the agenda. Jude, do you want to make a comment regarding the integrated performance report?
So probably a few things just to pull out from me. I think sickness absence is worth us having a conversation about, particularly as it impacts when we're in a period of peak demand. Our sickness absence remains high. Gertie's done quite a lot of work on focusing teams on the welcome back reviews, so that might be worthwhile picking up when we get to the people report. I think vaccinations is an issue for us. Flu remains high across all of our care organisations within our communities, and I'm not anticipating that sickness absence number will certainly improve over the month of December, judging from what we've experienced this month with staff absence, some of which is as a result of flu with low vaccination rates. I think a couple of other comments, while our time to recruitment looks low, I think we have work to do to get the process through the vacancy control panels, because I think it's frustrating some colleagues. So whilst I wouldn't want us to take confidence that our recruitment time is slick, because that's what's described here is just the processing time within once those approvals are made. And I think the process of getting some of our approvals is not as straightforward as it probably needs to be from talking out with our staff. I think from an operational performance, we have made progress in planned care, both in cancer, where we remain on track with our plan to deliver, and in our very longest waiters and our overall waitlist size. We will not have got to the 0 for 65 weekers by the end of December, and that's been some of the challenges in month. A little bit of that has been elements of patient choice and willingness to engage in appointments and treatments over a festive period. So we will have some long waiters remaining over 65 week at the end of December. But I think we have, you'll see when we get to the BAF, we have reduced the BAF risk score to its target risk score, given where we are overall on planned care. And we might want to pick up at some point in the agenda, maybe under the annual planning guidance, some of the documentation we've received from NHS England this week about a forward look on planned care for 25-26. I think we've yet to double down on some of the productivity metrics. We're making progress in some areas, as we can see through the CSE programme, but a long way to go, and particularly in theatres, but given the majority of our pressures in planned care improvements sitting outpatients, there's more for us to do, and much of those will rely on digital enablers for us to deliver some of those improvements. UEC remains incredibly challenged, and again, maybe we pick that up in the quality section of the board, where we've got some additional information on urgent and emergency care. Our current position at the end of December is actually slightly improved on November, which I would say is a phenomenal achievement of our teams, given the pressure of our sites to not only hold the position, but have improved ever so slightly. We are about 6.5% better than this time last year. So that demonstrates that we are doing some of the right things. However, we remain away from our target and a distance from that plan, although the distance from plan has reduced in month. So distance from plan in this November report was 10.6%. In December, it is reduced to 7.8%, and that's to reflect that seasonal variation in the plan. But it shows that we have got more resilience in our system than we had this time last year, although absolutely not where we want to be. And our 12-hour waits remain high, and they are higher in December of this year than they were in December of last year. And that's probably reflective of the capacity across the whole of our system. Ambulance delays, we have continued to hold our own in those. We have had some ambulance held over the past week at 4 hours, but none at 8 hours. And again, if we look across the Northwest, there are a considerable number of ambulances that are being held beyond 4 hours and 8 hours. So whilst our performance is not good in having ambulances at 4 hours waiting, teams are working hard to offload as quickly as they can, and particular to help Northwest Ambulance Services release crews across the broader Northwest region, because some of the other ICBs are more challenged than the Greater Manchester ICB is in ambulance offloads. But you know, we do recognise that we've got patients within our communities that are waiting for people to come to help them. Final couple of things, quality metrics. You can see the maternity improvement programme really helping to drive that improvement across maternity measures. Falls and pressure ulcers largely static, but given some of the focus work that we've done in workforce, our numbers, trying to hold our position on workforce numbers, it's a good balancing measure to say, you know, is there deterioration in quality measures as a result of some of the things that we're doing? And I don't think there's any evidence that there is. Rafiq might want to pick up on never events. And the final thing I will say, because I think the money we can talk about in the finance report is really just about infections and flu, and the focus we're having across the wards and departments, again, that Heather and Rafiq might want to pick up. We have had outbreaks, and again, that challenges us in urgent emergency care flow. And we're really reinforcing those universal precautions with our staff, given the vaccination rate. And I'll pause there.
Thank you, Jude. You've highlighted the key challenges. You've also ensured and illustrated the need for this board to continue its focus on where we see the improvements and sustaining them, but also being mindful of the various risks associated, particularly, you know, around planned care recovery, urgent care, cancer performance, our people issues, etc., which I'm sure we'll pick up as we progress through the board agenda. So thank you for highlighting those areas. Can I ask Jeff, please?
Thanks, Chair. Just want to take this opportunity, first of all, to pay tribute to the work going on at the moment, both in urgent care and planned care, given the winter pressures. The question I wanted to ask was about the performance of community health services across all 4 localities and the performance of adult social care in Salford. Where is that performance monitored and tracked? I can't see it in this performance report. It may be at Quality and Performance Committee, but I can't easily see it from the minutes. Quite a processing question, so I'm happy to take an answer, Chair, between meetings if that's easier for people.
Thank you.
I'm happy to pick that up, Rabina. So thanks, Jeff. The teams are doing a great job in UEC response. We pick that up, Jeff, as part of our daily, well, what is now a 3 times a day safety huddle on UEC. So managing to get out to those urgent responses within the 2 hours. The data's not easy to collect. We've had this issue previously, but the reporting into the system is showing that the community teams are working well, and we are challenging our urgent response teams as we sit today to say what more could they be doing to create, if we've invoked some rapid discharge protocols which rely on our urgent response teams then to pick up some of those patients for follow-up visits. So I'm fairly confident about the work of our urgent response teams. We had some challenges over snow periods, and we just prioritised those patients that we needed to get to, insulins, end of life, those kind of things. But teams did that dynamic risk assessment of who are the patients that we did need to see to urgently. In terms of adult social care, it's a really good question, and you might see it might be reflected in the quality and performance AAA, but we did have that conversation in the context of the vision that's on the board agenda today about, so where do we see the performance metrics alongside the vision that talked to the Care Quality Commission standards? And I think it's a gap in our governance, if I'm straightforward. So I am working, I've asked in Salford Care Org, what metrics do we see and can we see? There has been a historic issue, you may not recall, but we have discussed it previously at the board, around liquid logic with the local authority, which is where a lot of the data and information is stored. And Lorna, I don't think Paula, to be fair to her, will have this detail, but Lorna had done some work with the local authority to look at what interfaces we could establish so that we have visibility of those metrics. So I will take an action from this board to pick that back up with Lorna and to look at both in our quality committees and our performance committees that feed up to Q&P, where we have got line of sight to those social care metrics.
Yeah, thank you for raising that point, Jeff and Jude. Really appreciate you making that an action. It's very important, isn't it, that we have line of sight and further scrutiny of those performance metrics. Otherwise, we're not going to be able to track and assure ourselves that things are going in the right direction. There'll be an absence of information and a bit of a fudge, maybe. Thank you for that. Sue, please.
Hi, thanks, Chair. I just wanted to take a minute to reflect on what a really good performance report this is, considering the environment in the NHS at the moment and the performance of other organisations in the NHS. We've managed to maintain our A&E performance. Yes, it's not where we want it to be, but it's certainly looking a lot better than many organisations about. Our elective work is going in the right direction. Our finances are looking good relatively, and we've just about achieved our CIP. So I just want to take a moment to congratulate the team and to say, let's just pause and think about the good work that's gone on, because I suppose it's our job to focus on what isn't done and what could be better. But I think the environment we're in now, this is a really good performance report.
Thank you, Sue. Your comment is very well made and appreciated. And I think, given that we recognise the improvements, you're quite right, we don't often acknowledge them in the way that we should. So, you make the point really well. But it comes back to this emphasis of sustaining that improvement and retaining the growth and the learning that brings us to where we are in terms of our performance, and making sure that we don't become complacent because we're moving in the right direction, that we offer and we consider other ways of innovation, which is really good within our organisations. Our teams work really hard to deliver even more efficiencies, but absolutely right to acknowledge what has gone on, and well above and beyond actually our expectations in terms of where we are. So thank you. Aziz, please.
Thanks, Chair. I'd echo what Sue said. Actually, when you read this report, it's been a long time in getting here. When you look at all these graphs, and a lot of the movement is in the right direction, and that's really great, and a tribute to all the work done by everyone in our hospitals and services. I wanted to ask about the ambulance handover times, because the graph there shows it's about 2,250 on average every month are less than 15 minutes. I just wondered what percentage of ambulances that was meeting the target. And sort of also to ask, it's in the news this morning that lots of hospitals across the country, people are waiting 2 days in A&E. Huge pressures due to the flu. I just wondered how that is playing out in our four hospitals.
Thank you, Aziz. Jude?
Yeah, so thanks, Aziz. I've asked Alex that question as an overall percentage, and when we amend the performance report, we'll look at it. I don't want to give a guess of what I think that is, but I think it is actually quite high. The issue is the tail, as you've described, which is those that then we hold. And one of the things that we do is we do an assessment of the acuity in the ambulance. So we don't necessarily always offload in arrival time, if that makes sense. So we may have some patients that are, or ambulances that we hold for a longer period of time. So those that we've held for 4 hours, because those patients are less acute, and we try to get the more acute category patients into the ED faster. So we'll do almost a clinical triage with the ambulance services about who do we need to offload sooner. So that does result in sometimes some of those that are being held for a longer period of time, but we'll include the percentage in the numbers. In terms of numbers of patients in ED over long periods of time, without a doubt, we are largely holding our own with patients no longer than a day at the minute, but we have got some mental health patients that we've held for 2 days and 3 and up to 5 over the Christmas period. Heather has been escalating that all week with our colleagues in mental health. And I think that escalation's gone to Owen this morning to speak to the chief exec. So largely the patients that are in the EDs 2 days or more are predominantly patients awaiting mental health beds.
Owen, please proceed.
All right, okay. Yeah, just a couple of things. First of all, I think just listening to various comments, particularly by non-executive director colleagues, I just want to echo what the chair opened the meeting with about the thanks and appreciation to colleagues. It is pretty remarkable, and I think the point that Aziz and Sue have locked on, which is, you know, particularly when you look at the comparative position across the many parts of the country, and given the scale of our organisation, there's no doubt that there's some real good progress being made there. I think just a couple of specifics, just probably more assurance comments really, because it is the case that Gertie and colleagues have been leading on influencing the work around return to work interviews, but I think it's important to understand that that is not Gertie's job. It's very much all of our responsibility to make that work. And we had a conversation at our cost improvement meeting earlier this week, just around saying, when we look at sickness absence, for example, it's very, very important that we don't just look at the aggregate number.
It's gone, and we're trying desperately to get back in.
Hello, is that Jane speaking there? It's very, very important that we don't just sort of look at the aggregate picture. It's important that we look at our real hotspots and to make sure that things like our return to work interviews are at the maximum efficiency and application in those hotspots. So that is a piece of work that we're doing, and I just wanted the board to be assured on that. Also in the report, there's issues around theatre utilisation that have been quite static for quite a period of time. And again, it's just to sort of alert the board that we're now starting to kind of really work through how our get it right first time principles work, and to see how we can start to make some improvements, particularly given that we've had a review of our theatre utilisation and there's lots of sensible actions that come from that. What we need to do is to make sure that they get done. I think my final point is a little bit of a question, I think, Jude, that I'm just reflecting on, is that when you look at the RTT, and particularly the 35 weeks plus, and you look at the 52 weeks plus, and again, the direction of travel on those is very, very positive. I think it's just a question of, have we got the balance right between those newer cases that we've got in the RTT spread and still trying to make sure that we reduce those cases that still touch on the 65 weeks and the back end of, 52 weeks to 65 weeks. It's just a question, and maybe we can discuss offline, but I think I just wanted to make sure that we need to just make sure we've got that balance right, because it's great seeing the trajectory come down on the 35 weeks and so on and so forth, and 52 weeks, that is fantastic. But it's just to make sure that we've got that balance right. So, Jude, that's just possibly something just to get your reflections on.
Yeah, thanks, Owen, for that. So when we get to discuss the new documentation that's come out from NHS England, there is a focus on improving the percentage of patients treated within 18 weeks. And overall, every organisation has to improve that by 5%. That has not been a directive. So we are treating patients in date order. So, the mantra has been treat the longest wait, work from the back of your waiting list, to segment the waiting list and say, well, how do we improve those treated in 18 weeks requires us to take a hard look at our capacity to take patients from the 0 to 18 week category and see and treat them, and continue to do that long waits backlog reduction. So I think we have to think really carefully about what is our strategy to do that. How do we understand our capacity to be able to accommodate that and to get that 5% improvement that will be in the plan for next year? What's the additional capacity or change that's required to deliver that? Because, I can tell you we've taken 18,000 patients off the waiting list, but the RTT percentage is static at 52%. So I think it's a conversation for us to pick up in the planning session in February and understand what's the art of the possible. And I've asked BI colleagues to start to do some intelligent modelling around that, to be able to see what our opportunities are and what the risks are that it poses to us from a financial position to do both.
Thank you, Jude. I'm unsure whether we've lost the chairman's connection. Chair? So, whilst we try to reconnect the chair, Carmen, I wonder if you would move us on, please.
Yes, happy to do so till we can get the chair back.
Thank
So
you.
the next item on the agenda is the board assurance framework, and I'll hand over to you, Jane, to present that.
Thank you, Carmen. So the paper I will take as read by all members of the Board of Directors. This is a paper that collates what the board is seeing month on month through the individual board committees, and therefore reflects information that is being reviewed frequently and via those board committees. This paper presents the updated position as at end of Q2, 31st of December. It confirms that those principal risks are reviewed via the respective board committees. It asks the board to consider the progress of those actions as they see it here collated. Note the position that Jude has described with regards to planned care and the risk relating to our performance, and to note that an internal audit, as always, takes part in this next quarter of our board assurance framework as part of the internal audit's opinion at year end. We are progressing the work to undertake those deep dives and assurance mapping, i.e. to look at the strength of our controls and assurances against the principal risks as they're reviewed via audit committee. And this paper describes that also. So I'll take the paper as seen. Sue, I can see that you have your hand raised.
Thanks, Jane. We discussed this, Craig and I discussed the risks that are the responsibility of the Finance Committee. And I think we concluded that due to the wording of the risk, we don't feel we're ever going to be able to improve the scoring. It certainly doesn't feel possible. And we wondered whether we need to look at the wording again going forward. So, for example, if we give you financial delivery, I think we would agree we're delivering financially pretty well this year now. And yes, there's a lot of caveats, but we are looking at declaring our commitment to delivering the year-end plan to the ICB. And yes, if you look at the wording of the risk, we can't actually reduce the risk score because it's dependent on having full multi-year cost-saving plans. So I just wondered whether we need to have a bit of a think about that, and whether some of the wording on these risks needs changing. You know, likewise the capital investment. I mean, I think we would agree we are prioritising capital investment effectively. And we weren't quite sure how we could reduce that risk. So again, perhaps we need a bit of a pragmatic discussion so that we can actually make the risk scoring a bit more dynamic.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there. Jane and I had a conversation recently about exactly what you just mentioned. There is an opportunity for us to review, particularly going forward into next year, and I feel that we will definitely do that. Otherwise, you're quite right. The risk score will never change, and we'll have this conundrum, won't we? That we are improving, we are meeting it, but the language does not reflect the actions and the achievements that we have made. So we are on that is work in progress, and it's an action for this board. Thank you, Sue. Can I ask Chris, please, to comment?
Yeah, thanks, Robina. It was a similar point, really, about the sort of changes in the risk scores. We had this discussion at Quality Performance Committee in the context of urgent and emergency care. Really, but really about the level had remained the same, but also about the sort of realistic target level that there is in the system. So I think sometimes when you look through this, the target scores are really quite low, and that's great to have that ambition. But the realistic, pragmatic, to use Sue's word, approach here might be slightly different. So I'd welcome any involvement I can have in that discussion from a quality performance point of view to get those right, Jane.
Thank you for that, Chris. I mean, there is an opportunity for each of the delegated subcommittees, for the chairs actually, to review the BAF risk scores and of course the statements that underpin them. And if you look at where they've been signed off and updated, there are a few updates, but most of it remains static. So I think the opportunity is already there for you to review in those subcommittees and come back with recommendations to the board through Jane's help, so we can begin.
It's just the overall. It's just
thank you for that, Chris. Tim.
Yeah, I'd echo the previous points. I think the audit committee, and when we've kind of restructured it, or at the beginning of it being an audit and risk committee, so I think it can probably have a bit of a coordinating role in picking up some of these issues. I think we also need to remind ourselves that BAF has come a long way. The format, the structure is good, but it does lack that dynamism in terms of the target scores, the gaps to those scores, the realism of the dates, and a natural prudence, I think, in us not wanting to close that gap. Or so I think there's a piece the audit and risk committee as it is now can coordinate along with the other committees.
Thank you for that, Tim. It's really well made. I think Jane, do you want to come back? This item?
Not at all, Robina. I think the points made are really pertinent. Completely agree with where Sue, Chris and Tim have just been, and I'll be working with Audit Committee, of course, to make sure that we provide that support to the BAF going forward. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. So then we move on, colleagues, to agenda item number 10, and that's the finance reports from the 22nd of November and the 20th of December, Sue.
Okay, I'll take it as read that you've read the November report, because we obviously moved on from there. The December meeting, I think, was very positive. We have a small adverse variance to plan, but that is small, and looks like, you know, there is potential to clear that by the year end. Owen may want to speak more about the GM ask that we formally commit to achieving our plan by year end, and we discussed our ability to do that and what the wording in any letter back to the ICB might be and what caveats there might be to that. So perhaps Owen could pick that up in a bit. We, after saying in November that we, I think it gave me the wrong deficit there. After saying in November we were almost certain we were going to get the Pennine transaction capital funding, we got it in December. So such are the ups and downs of finance in the NHS. So the team are working hard now to actually deliver on the capital plan, but that does raise difficulties when you don't have funding confirmed until pretty much the last quarter of the year. CIP is team have done really well, but we do have the ongoing concern about the recurrent versus the non-recurrent, and I know the team are working with managers in the organisation now to see whether any of those non-recurrent savings can be flipped into recurrent savings. I think we have to bear in mind every non-recurrent saving goes back into being a pressure onto next year's budget. So it is really important that we achieve the recurrent the recurrent proportion, although I wouldn't want to undermine the fantastic achievement in making the amount of savings that we've managed to identify and transact in the current year. Cash is looking good now that we've had the support from the ICB, which arose from us committing to the level of plan. And all in all, I think our only real outstanding risks are the funding for the 24-25 pay award. We've covered the gap, as Craig will tell us, non-recurrently, but there remains a gap in the pay award funding going into the next financial year. The whole GM position is not particularly good, and our position is probably a lot better than a number of others in GM, and it'll be interesting to see whether that gives us any pressure going into the year end. But otherwise, overall, you know, a pretty positive meeting and a positive report.
Thank you, Sue. I'll open to any comments and also invite Owen some further updates and ICB response.
Thank you, Chair. Would you like me just to respond on the back of Sue's question, if that's okay, please?
Yes.
Yeah, so just in terms of, and this links a little bit to the performance oversight meetings that we've been having as well. We've been asked this question by the Greater Manchester ICB to see whether we would be willing to confirm that we still intend to meet our year-end target. I know we've got it down to 4 million, but that's because of the 70-odd million. So when I'm speaking here, I'm talking ultimately about the year-end of 75 million, which has always been our thought process within that. And I think the language, Chair, that we feel comfortable with in terms of responding to the ICB ask of us is that we still remain very much committed to meeting that target of 75 million full year outturn deficit. The sort of three areas where we would just probably put some caveat to that is one, the ongoing issue around industrial action, and particularly where does that get covered off? In previous years that has been covered off to a degree nationally. The thought process is now that we are expected to absorb that ourselves, which does make that quite challenging. There's also been an ongoing pressure in relation to adult social care that we still need to work through and be confident of, and also around urgent and emergency care. And I'd be careful just to kind of delineate that one a little bit. So there are things around urgent and emergency care which are perhaps more in our span of influence as an organisation. So an aspect of it would be obviously sickness absence and the degree to which that impacts on our ability to deliver on urgent emergency care and therefore bank and agency costs. That's probably a little bit more within our span of influence, because if we talk about return to work interviews and so on and so forth, the things that you can do. But there are some things that sit within urgent emergency care that do cost And I think Jude, articulated quite clearly. You take mental health as an example. There is a requirement and dependency on other system partners to help us deal with that. So when I talk about urgent and emergency care as perhaps the third strand of caveats that we would have to our commitment to get to the deficit of 75 million, is probably those urgent and emergency care aspects that do depend on other partners to do their bit. But generally, I think we would be looking to say that we still remain committed to our plan. I think Sue's absolutely right to highlight that not everybody is in that position. And again, the hard work and graft of so many colleagues, I'm really appreciative of, and I know that the board is appreciative of the work that's being put in play around that. So hopefully that gives some context as to how we would be responding to that. I think just one final thing I would just say is 25-26 looks very, very challenging for everybody in the system. But as Sue's alluded to, even though we're working hard to improve our recurrent position, again, that our foundations for 25-26, I think, are reasonably positive in comparison to not just people within the GM system, but my understanding as to where things sit nationally. So I just add those points in, Chair.
Thank you, and these points are really well made and resonate, with our approach to how we manage our money and the funding flows that come in and out of the organisation. The themes around industrial action, adult social care, urgent emergency care. You're quite right to identify the interdependencies. There are some things that we can control, and some other things that are out of our domain, but within a system that we are working within. It's really important that we stay close to what benefits we can achieve and be mindful and very open and honest, as we have been in all of these conversations, about what we can do well and sustain, and where we will experience further risks. And the fact that 25-26 will look even more compromising, not just for the system, but it's about how we also focus those challenges that we're going to be presented with. And I just want to add a further comment to thank Craig and his team, because it is because we have transparent and open, candid conversations about our FSP and where we are with managing our plans, that we're able to achieve what we have done, but it puts us in good stead in terms of that cultural improvements and the baseline of the babies that drive this change, and college engagement and how it impacts on our patients and carers and service users and wider community. Their understanding of our approach just enables us to have these types of conversations, and also ground them by triangulating, as Owen has just done very eloquently, about the other risks that surround us and will impact us eventually. But we are, as a board, very focused on those. And the urgent and emergency care is really relevant in this context. So thank you for that. Are there any further questions or comments for Sue in her report before we move on to Craig to give his finance report? Take it that there isn't. So Craig, we will now move on to your report, please. Matters for escalation.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'll just add to the bits rather than repeat any comments, because a lot of ground has been covered from the finance report taken as read. And I'd just like to also just comment that, as Owen has said, this is a huge effort on the finance front, and it is all the senior responsible officers in the CIP programs that have been working tirelessly on some of this, and we've still, we've had a lot of traction, because what I would describe as shifted hugely in this organisation is the engagement with the programs of work, and we've still got some way to go, which is good news and bad news. It's good news in the sense that we can seek some more opportunities around some of the things that Owen described earlier on the productivity front. We must be sort of focusing our attention on that now. But ultimately, the latest CIP figures that are sort of up to date beyond the report and this week's report is that we've fully identified now, the 85.6 million CIP target. We've transacted 93% of that, which is 79.2 million. So, you know, 7% to go. If someone told me a few months ago, would you like to take this position? I'd say, yes, please, you know, in terms of where we're at. But as Sue has alluded to, I think the main focus has got to be making the foundation for next year as solid as we can now. So focusing on that recurrent CIP that sort of builds the building blocks, if you will, for the start point for next financial year. We have improved slightly since this report. We're at of the 64.2 million recurrent that we'd planned to achieve, we're around 37.5 transacted. So that's around 58% of where we need to be. We do have line of sight to a total of 45 million. So we need to transact some schemes. Just under 8 million schemes need to be transacted to get us to 70% of the target transacted, and then we'll be working between now and next board on how we plug the gap, which is circa around 19 million to be transacted, to get us to a closer start point to next financial year. And just finally, a deliberate recap, rather, because I'm conscious I'm repeating, but just for avoidance of doubt, there are some things that I would describe as emerging pressures this year that will also affect into next year, and they are some that Owen has alluded to. So we do have some recurrent pay award pressures that were not accounted for at the time into the next year's FSP. We also have any subsequent impact of adult social care pressures that we don't get settled this year. We are working on that with the council and with the ICB as to what a recurrent settlement to those in-year pressures needs to look like, but anything different to what is costing us will affect the baseline for next year. And obviously, Jude and I are also in discussion about when we set the annual plan, where do we set it ambition-wise for our income level and our activity in relation to elective recovery. And that will be some key component parts that will influence next year's sort of revenue position. And finally, Chair, just on the capital front, I think we've mentioned it here before, but I'll say it again because it raised in Finance Committee, is our commitment now is that we've got our capital plans, the aggregate of our capital plans across provider trusts is now within the control total of GM. So that's the good news. We've been working on trying to get those plans down to a reasonable level. What we need to do now, particularly in the Northern Care Alliance as well as other trusts, is spend what we've planned to spend. At the minute, we're at 22 million actual spend, and we need to be getting to the close edge of 67 million. So we need to make sure that we accelerate that spend now to spend what we do have. And like Sue has said, one of the main reasons we have been uncertain about where we've been has been around the settlement of the Pennine Acute transaction, but that now has come through and we can get motoring on, and there is some assurance there, risk rated, that we follow through in Finance Committee that we can still spend what we've got, but we must monitor that closely because we can't miss the opportunity to spend an allocation that we've received now.
Thank you very much for a very comprehensive and succinct update, Craig. Can I ask colleagues, are there any comments or questions, particularly related to the recommendations that we were asked to confirm? Okay, Tim, please.
Craig, yeah, I just wanted to ask on the workforce appendix. Is it still our projection that we're going to hit the planned target of sort of 19,470, given we're some way short of that? So it's just what our projection is at this point in the year.
So on the workforce projections, Tim, we'll need to work through what the new articulated whole time projection might be, and we've just talked about this recently about our start position for next year's annual plan for our people plan, because at the point in time, Tim, where we set the plan, I think we've now acknowledged when we did in month 8, when we approved a revised mitigation plan, we changed the shape of how we will deliver the back end of the cost reduction. One of the main changes was we were going to deliver more through non-pay than originally anticipated, therefore less through pay. And what that will mean is we won't hit our original headcount reduction numbers. And it's a very recent discussion. It's a good challenge, Tim, that we'll bring through on Finance Committee to say we need to understand where we're going to land, and then therefore what our start position is for the people planning in the next year's plan as we do the next submission.
Yeah, no, thanks, Craig. Yeah, I think we probably need to articulate that a bit clearer in our reports, because we don't want to be presented that, you know, that this is a planned kind of adjustment rather than a failure to hit that original target. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Just sorry, Chair, I can just come in. One of the issues we have, Tim, is although you are allowed to change your forecast and the shape of how you're going to deliver the original plan, you can't change the original plan, if you know what I mean. So what we might want to do is bring our performance against our revised forecast. So are we where we thought we would be against our forecast rather than our original plan? Because the forecast is going to be different by default, but we can do that too.
So that's a really good way forward, actually. Thank you, Tim, for that, and thank you, Craig. Heather, please.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to take the opportunity to thank Craig and his colleagues to work alongside my directors of nursing and nursing leads to help us contribute our part in the SIP achievement and the financial sustainability plan, but also to give assurance to the board, as was pointed out by Jude earlier, the balancing measures that we could look at are our commitment to reduce bank and agency have not resulted in impact on quality and safety. And for some detail to show that that trajectory is sustained, consistent and significant, we compared bank spend between Christmas last year and, well, year before last, 2023, and Christmas last year, and we've seen a reduction of over 1,000 hours of bank usage between those two time periods in our registered nursing and registered midwifery colleagues. And for our healthcare support workers, that went up to almost 3,000 hours less. We are, of course, looking at fill rates and care hours per patient day, and we are not seeing an impact on our care hours per patient day and ensuing impact on quality. So that's some assurance to the board, and we'll be looking at those statistics a bit more in our Quality and Performance Committee and our People and Education Committee. Finally, I would say we did take some quite assertive action in our areas of high acuity by reducing escalated rates where it was safe to do so. We continue to monitor that. We've had to make adjustments in one particular area, which will be addressed in our perinatal report, but that's all within the current governance framework for the work that we're doing around escalated rates and non-contractual hours. So just wanted to give the board that level of assurance.
Thank you, Heather. That was really helpful, and again, it illustrates that we how we are becoming more focused, not just on where the risks are emerging, but the risks that are unknown to us and how we are managing them, but particularly around our people. So that, again, is really important to convey to all of us that we're going in the right direction, but there's still more work to be done. Can I ask colleagues to confirm that we have received the report and the updated position? And raise your hand. Yeah, that's fine. Okay. Can I also take this opportunity to add to the comments already made, but for noting, please, in the minutes, that the trust performance on the SIP is commendable. It really is. I don't think we could have imagined that we would have reached this position, but it really is commendable. And I want to note again all of the hard work that's been done to achieve this position. However, we note also that recurrent delivery remains a challenge and must remain a focus for the organisation to ensure sustainable financial improvement going forward, based on what we've heard and what we know are risks and some of the emerging risks that have been pointed out. So that requires further close monitoring of the deficit recovery trajectory, with regular updates on any significant variances or emerging risks, as I just said, and focus efforts on addressing recurrent gaps in the SIP to ensure long-term financial stability. So the work of the finance committees are continuing to do their job with that oversight of the capital programme, as Craig mentioned, but also those risks actively managed and mitigated, as we've also discussed today. And finally, the further updates on pay award funding pressures and potential mitigations to be escalated to the board as and when they present themselves, as we have been doing in the past. So thank you, colleagues. That was a really helpful and important discussion. May I suggest at this point we take a break before we go into quality and performance, and we will reconvene at 11 o'clock. Is that okay, everyone? Thank you. See you back here at 11 o'clock. Welcome back, everyone. Prompt and punctual. Thank you very much. So, Chris, may we continue with you on the Quality Performance Committee reports, please?
Sure. I'll just get the report up in front of me.
Don't worry. Agenda item number 11 for February.
Yeah. Thanks. Well, thanks, Rabina. Just preface this, my few comments on the two reports that there are. So we've had meetings of the Quality and Performance Committee in November and December. So there's a AAA report for each of those meetings. Just reminders that the AAA reports are a summary, and of course the full minutes are available. I think, Jane, I'm right in saying through admin control for board members to see if board members wish to see the full discussion.
That's correct.
I think the AAA gives a sort of overview of the range of things that we've considered, and I think you'll agree it's a very wide range of issues that quality assurance, Quality and Performance Committee scrutinises. I'd also just want to preface my few remarks by saying I think in the committee we're very conscious of the points that's been made already in the meeting about the pressure on the system at the moment, and the gratitude to the staff, both those who are serving the committee, but also those who are at the front line delivering the service, because I think the dedication of both those groups of staff, all those staff, really shines through in the discussion. It's always when you're presenting these reports, there's a tendency, isn't there, to because it's a scrutiny report, to pick on the things where things might be improved or we may need to improve. So I think it is worth bearing in mind that we're not describing here all the very good things that have happened always, and we can pick out particular issues, but we have to bear in mind that all the care that is being provided all the time. So you see the report. The context is as I've described. You'll see that through the alerts in the two reports, we've picked up on a number of relatively specific issues, such as consent, such as controlled drugs, such as the assurance levels on compliance with CQC regulations, and so on. And we have processes for monitoring those and scrutinising those. So the teams are coming back to look at those in more detail for us. So I think the committee is beginning to, through the work that teams have been doing in presenting information, is beginning to see that sort of information. I just pick up, if I may, on Jeff's question earlier in the meeting about Salford adult care services, and Jude responded at the time earlier in the meeting, but it is something that we picked up at Quality Assurance, and we have noted that it was something where we didn't really have a consistent performance framework, I think is probably the best way of putting it, and that's really a gap. So having the vision, which is later on the agenda here, we had a fairly detailed discussion, I think, Heather, you'd agree, on the need for some sort of mechanism for the board to have line of sight of that activity of social care and its responsibilities, its direct responsibilities for social care in the Salford area. So that was there. I finally wanted to, well, there are two other things. One is the very specific issue of nasogastric tube placement training, and Rafiq may want, and others may want to comment both on the specific training issue, but also on incidents that have been reported since this committee, and I think it is really important that, you know, that we get this one right. And I think although it is a very specific issue from the board's point of view, it's something we need to have that assurance of, because it relates to never events. The other thing I just wanted to make sure we had our attention drawn to was the comment on urgent and emergency care. Jude gave us comprehensive review at the meeting, our most recent meeting, on urgent and emergency care, and also elective care and cancer. Of course, we know that elective care and cancer, the situation is slightly better, is optimistic there, but on urgent and emergency care, I think Jude was careful to point out to us all the high number of actions that have been taken, but at the same time the level of risk in the system, and almost, I think, at the same time as we were having the meeting, in fact slightly before the meeting, the ICB wrote to the trust, setting out a series of expectations of actions that would be taken as part of the response to the current pressures. We did have some discussion about that letter at the meeting, but it hadn't arrived early enough for us to have a sort of full detailed discussion. And Rabina, following the meeting, there was an exchange of emails in which you correctly asked for further information to be provided on an assurance for the board on this important issue to be provided. And what Jude has done is provide the appendix to the December AAA report, which you see, which lists, it's Appendix 1, expectations for management of safe and effective urgent care flow over winter, ICB letter 19th of December, which is there not because it was discussed in detail, particularly at the meeting, but in order to try to provide the board with some early assurance on this important issue. So I'll leave it there, Rabina, obviously. Myself or some of the relevant executives to be able to answer any questions.
Thank you very much for that, Chris. A very comprehensive update, and it is complicated, always has been, when we receive reports relating to patient safety, quality of care, and the standards that are required by our regulators. So that update was really helpful. I know there will be further comments, and I want to make a comment at the end. I'm going to invite Rafiq. Are you going to speak to the Never event, Rafiq?
Yeah, yes, Chair, and another point, if that's all right.
Yes, please do.
Thank you, Chair. So a couple of things I wanted to comment on. If you look at the AAA report, Chris has highlighted the issue with consent. So I just wanted to assure the board that of the 7 actions that were overdue 4 have now been closed. We had a follow-up discussion at QPC in terms of update, and the other 3 we are working to close in earnest. There was a little bit of diversion of team focus because they were looking at digital solutions, which just wasn't just meant that the focus wasn't on ticking off the action. So we've rectified that. On nasogastric tubes, that remains a concern for us. In some of our reports, you'll see that our training compliance isn't where it needs to be. And since our last QPC meeting, we've had one never event. So while we've had a reduction in these incidents and they've stabilized over a period of time, it's something that we will need to attend to with additional focus in terms of ensuring our training compliance is at the level that we want it to be. There's a continuing task and finish group which is looking at this and hopefully will help support the work.
I mean, just on the NGT, it's a long-standing issue of this board. We have remained focused on this for a very long time. The fact that the Never event came in just highlighted further not just the compliance around the training. I mean, that's one element of it. It's about also safeguarding patients who are vulnerable, and I don't think that was achieved in the Never event that was presented to us. So there are certainly further follow-ups and further requirement to ensure that we do provide appropriate safeguarding for our vulnerable adults, and not just focus on the NGT training and compliance numbers, but actually the retention and the importance of making sure that our colleagues who have responsibility for this continue to understand their responsibility in terms of interprofessional standards, actually, among other things. So thank you for that, Rafiq. Heather, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to give a bit more information or reflections on the NG Tube and another issue. Just to, I suppose, reiterate, and of course the board is aware that that incident, as will all others, be subject to a review, and we will be using our new framework for looking at events. So not just root cause analysis approach, but using the SEEPS model, which looks at environment, tools colleagues have available to work with, psychological issues, pressures, patients. So it's quite a multifaceted approach, which gives us a richer information, takes us away from blame and judgment, and focuses on learning. So just to remind the board that we will have a more fulsome picture after that investigation. What we have done so far in the days following the event is done an initial look at those factors. And what I can say is that when the initial cluster of NG Tube and Never events took place, we did a number of improvements, quite significant improvements, and two key ones were controls around restricting when people start feeds via nasogastric tubes, and also the level of training and which colleagues and which colleague groups have those trainings. So from October 2023, we said that nurses, nursing associates, and foundation year colleagues will have this as part of their job specific training. From April of last year, sorry, October 2023 and April of 2024, medical staff competencies for medics, as instructed by Dr. Hilary Tyne, would have that as part of their competencies. And then June of 2024, there were additional amendments. So we've done that. We've done that as a staged process. We also looked at this individual case, and training was not an issue. All the colleagues involved were training, and the two key training would be nasogastric X-ray interpretation for medical colleagues, and nasogastric feed tube insertion management for nursing. They weren't the issues in this case. What we did know is that the feed was very complex. Colleagues, the patient required this level of feeding, and with some care and attention, colleagues tried repeatedly to instigate the feed. They did all the checks. However, the feed was started after 8 o'clock. That's not a causal link, but I'm demonstrating to you the control that we put in about not having out-of-hour feeding was based on evidence and where we know what the risk periods are. So for me, it's about really thinking about the psychology of those colleagues. Were they, or what's the learning around decision-making around vulnerable adults, as you pointed out, Rabina, the clinical need for feeding, but also the controls and the safety parameters that are put in place. And I think there is something more sophisticated happening in terms of what's led to this NG tube feeding. And my point is really not to I think the conflation of training and incidents is an obvious one to make. But what this new approach of looking at incidents is telling us that we do need to dig deeper around what are some of the things that lead to significant harm. The attempts that colleagues made to try and feed this patient were numerous. What they didn't do was do an additional X-ray at the end of several attempts. So we're getting to the nub of some of the issues that led to this harm. There will be learning. Nobody comes to work to do a bad job. The safeguarding elements of this, we are stepping through that. But what the team are able to identify are the controls that we put in place. What else do we need to have to allow colleagues to observe them? If they are deviating from them, to be very clear that they are doing that, and escalating if the needs of the patient outride the policies and the controls that we put in place.
That was really helpful, Heather. I think what it raises also for me is when we read the Never events through the report itself, it wasn't complete. And what you've just done there is clarify some of the areas that I identified earlier in the conversation around why I was concerned. So there's something in terms of the learning and development of how we present information and how we ensure that we're not leaving a box open for wide interpretation which doesn't exist.
I think that's a really important point, Robina, and maybe for the board, we try very hard to alert the board immediately after an event. That is in the absence of a very in-depth look at what happened. So what I will caution the board, therefore, is receive it as information, but resist making judgments on that very high level information that's delivered, because what will happen is afterwards, as we do a more in-depth look at the incident, more information will come to light. And what I'm doing now is telling you this verbally. The investigation is still ongoing and not complete. And I thought it helpful to do that in order to I think encourage you to suspend judgment at this point, give you the assurance that training is not a causal factor, and assurance that we will be looking into the improvements that are needed further.
Then I would suggest in the future that the comment you just made there is included within the email. So that
Thank you. Yeah, no, that's a really good point. Yeah.
Thank you for that, Heather. Jude and then Chris, please. Jude?
Yeah, Chris might want to go first because I was just going to talk to the urgent care.
Just Heather, I agree totally with what you just said. I think there's a bit of sort of learning about the level of information and the sort of way that things are described when they're put to the non-executives, because some of the communication just opens questions up, doesn't it, rather than closes down. So it's just a bit of looking at how those things are described, maybe. But it's important that information is provided. But thanks. Sorry, that's all I had to say, Robina.
Thank you. Jude, please.
Yeah, thank you. I'll just pick up on Chris's and your asks, Robina, about the letter that we received from the ICB about UEC. So I'll just try and build on what we discussed earlier rather than repeat. I think let me start by saying you will see from these actions that out of the 18 actions, 16 are directed to the acute trusts and not the system. And yet we do know that urgent and emergency care is a system response. So just take it in that context that we will do our bit, but it is about the whole system acting to protect and safeguard our patients. The other thing that I would want to start with is, well, it talks about management of safe and ineffective urgent care. It is about flow. These are process issues about capacity and demand, and not necessarily about the safety and experience of patients within our departments who are experiencing incredibly long delays. So what isn't asked for in here, but just want to pull out, is that Heather, Rafiq and I have a daily urgent and emergency care huddle. with all of the care orgs, where we asked specifically for SIP reps around duty of candour being completed for patients that have waited over 12 hours in the department, and that care rounding has all been complete for all of the patients that are on corridors or temporary escalation spaces. And we're doing that 3 times a day currently, while we're in a series of heightened pressure. I think it's fair to say on those matters that we've got, I wouldn't say full assurance that every patient every time has had a documented duty of candour and care rounding. But that compliance is definitely improving through that daily check and challenge. So the last few days, it has been particularly challenging in Salford Emergency Department, but Heather has deployed the corporate nursing teams to go out and support those activities being completed, to ensure that we are receiving those assurances. So I just wanted to say that, because this document, these actions don't talk to those things, which is what the Care Quality Commission will look at first and foremost. If they arrived in our emergency departments today, they would be looking at the care needs of patients, you know, the care rounding, and the duty of candours that have been completed for those over 12 hours. So I think in terms of the gaps and actions, we will pick those up and start to report progress on those through Quality and Performance Committee, through our urgent care report. You can see that there are a number of things, and we've experienced this really when we're in a heightened sense of escalation, about the lack of data and digital visibility on expected dates of discharge, and that is an issue in forward planning. So it doesn't necessarily help us. We are managing in the moment, in the day, rather than what does tomorrow look like for us, because we know what our predicted discharges are for tomorrow and the day after. So that's work that I will pick up with Lorna, and we'll look at how we get some greater visibility through our systems on those particular issues. We had a conversation, and some of that links to the MIAA audit, Tim, on discharge. So there is a theme that runs between these two things. There was a conversation that we had at Quality and Performance Committee about the bed reduction plan and its links to the FSP and this document and current state. And what we reported is currently, certainly for the rest of this financial year, it is not safe to close any more beds in line with our FSP for the duration of this year. And what we will bring is a strategic bed model as part of our annual planning for 25-26 that helps us just talk back to that FSP ambition, because we need to understand whether we have to find a different mitigating plan if the beds out are not an option for us in terms of maintaining safe and effective flow. So those were, I think, the key things I just wanted to pull out from that document.
Thank you, Jude. I do have a comment which I'll make at the end, but that's a really helpful update. Chris, before we go to Joe, Chris, are you going to speak to something that Jude has mentioned, or is it
Yes, Jude, I think you're right in pointing out that this is very much an ICB view of the world, isn't it? As what it doesn't include sort of everything, and certainly not everything that you know, the team are having to manage in terms of urgent care pathways. One of the things, and I just to make no apologies for mentioning this, although it's not directly in here, is the staff and the impact on staff, because that's another major plank of what you're having to manage at the moment. So I guess from a board point of view, and indeed a Quality Performance Committee point of view, some assurance that, you know, measures have been taken to support the staff in this, who are in a very difficult circumstances, stressful circumstances, is part of the overall plan, and I know it is, but this ICB document doesn't I don't think it mentions staff at all, which I found strange personally.
So
I just made that point.
No, your point is really well made, and therein lies our responsibilities, isn't it, as a board? How do we make this relatable to our staff? The focus of attention on UEC and all of the other elements that Jude and you have illustrated in the QPC updates is about our people, is about our patients, is about how we provide care, and is about reducing waiting times, all the things that we've captured in this conversation. It is not driven by the ICB ask, because we know that there are elements of how we work within the system that is impacting upon our ability, our capacity and capability to meet the care needs appropriately, as already has been described. However, there's something in this which is the ask from the board in terms of our own assurance of those things which are in our control, those things which we have line of sight of, due to Canada being a really good example. We should be able to illustrate, we are monitoring and measuring the improvements, but the focus on sustaining the improvement and increasing the improvement is really important. And I see that element of assurance and good governance really emerging in a much more steadfast way in this process that we're using. But I'm mindful, as members of the public will be mindful, they will be hearing things outside of our care organisation, which are statements made by the Department of Health, statements made by the ICB, and there will be increased expectations that waiting times will reduce. Not talking about care initially, specifically here, because our aspiration as a board and our colleagues work really hard to deliver safe care and compassionate care to our patients. But understanding that context and the system's resilience that underpins it, and our focus on the early outcomes and improvements that we are making, just means as a board, through the QPC, we just need to maintain that focus and take the independent reviews, MIA audits are really good, but the external review of others is also important. What's happening outside of the organisation, where perhaps learning can be had for us. We talk about benchmarking, don't we? But do we really bring that evidence of learning into these sorts of conversations? Probably feel we maybe do need to give more consideration to those aspects. Joe, thank you very much. You've been waiting very patiently. Would you like to make your comments and observations, please?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just a couple of brief comments. So the first is the reference to nasogastric feed tubing training on page 136. Yeah. And my apologies if I've missed it elsewhere in this paper. Because these are public-facing papers, it would be interesting to know what the rate is. It's quite tantalising to say it's not at 90%, but then not know where it is, because if it's at 89% or if it's at 39%, those are two very different scenarios. So that was just one observation. And then the second one is it just interested one then to know, why is the threshold 90%? And if that's a national rate, it's suggesting that a non-compliance of 10% is an appropriate place to be. And having listened to the clinical experts and the discussion that's just occurred, it wouldn't seem to me, if I put myself in the mode of a patient, that would be entirely reassuring. So I just wonder whether it's an ambitious enough threshold, because training per se is not a difficult thing to achieve, and it impacts obviously eventually on delivery, safety and quality assurance. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a really helpful and insightful observation. And I think it reminds us, doesn't it, that we have public-facing documents and they will be interpreted differently. Unless they're listening to the discussion, they may not really know how that is contextualised. So let's ask Heather to come back on that comment, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Robina, and thank you for Joe for that really important point. And I think Gertie's come online to help me with perhaps answering that question. But the current compliance rate from the last report is 85.51%. This is over a denominator of 5,143 colleagues. and those are a compliance of 4,398. The threshold of 90% takes into account the rotation that we see in medical colleagues, people joining the organisation when these reports are run, before they have a chance to get on board, and availability of courses. 90% is an appropriate level to have that threshold. If we go by care organisations and group services, we're looking at 6 segments of the organisation. The eligible staff in the diagnostic and pharmacy are 9, the denominator. The compliance level in that is 6, and the compliance percentage is 66.67. Of that, there is one colleague that we are targeting to, sorry, not targeting, let me adjust my language. We are seeking to repeatedly support to get their compliance. That person and that group of that workforce group, there is a question as to whether that competency has been appropriately applied, and that is actively being looked at. So if we take out the diagnostic and pharmacy anomalous figure because of the low numbers, we will see our organisational threshold go up to above 90%. Because all the other compliance levels are above 80 and 85, above 85. So that is a constant, we're constantly vigilant of that. Our head of our learning and development training leads in nursing, midwifery and allied health professional and medical training liaise with service leads, and we do have those constant dialogues to ask colleagues, managers, to have those conversations. So I'm really appreciative of the question, Joe, to give me an opportunity to give that more detail. But 90% is where we should be aiming. 85.1 is not where we want to be, and there is a need for that continuous leadership attention, which I can hopefully give an assurance that we have.
Very much, Heather. Joe, Gertie, do you have any to make?
I've just put a comment in the chat, Chair. Heather has covered it incredibly well. It would be reasonable, and in fact, Joe will probably be aware that all of our other training requirements are either set at 90 or 95%, depending on the relevant training itself. So it is reviewed regularly.
Thank you for that update and wider assurance, actually. Very helpful. Can we move on then, colleagues, to agenda item number 11? That is 11.2, Learning from Death Reports. Rafiq.
Thank you, Chair. I will take the report as read and just maybe highlight some of the important things I want to draw out, if that's all right, for colleagues. This is our 4 times a year. We do it quarterly report on learning from deaths. And in the alert section, just a couple of things to bring to your attention. We had, if you recall, some alerts related to our outcomes from a fracture neck of femur perspective, and there's ongoing work to further understand those. And this is just to alert QPC and now the board that work was due to be completed by January, but just needs a little bit more time because some of the work hadn't been completed on one of our sites. So we're expecting that to come together in February. So just to note that. Structured judgment reviews we always report on and have had fluctuations and discussions around this. We're at 75% currently, which is a reduction from where we were in the last reporting cycle. And we're doing some work in terms of ensuring there's additional capacity there and some focused work with colleagues in the Oldham Hospital, which seems to be the place where we're having most of the challenge. And colleagues will be aware that we've received a prevention of future death notification, which we have responded to and have absorbed the learning from. And there's just some issues related to the depth of coding. And you will recall we've discussed coding capacity in the organization on a couple of occasions in board. And that's just to bring it to your attention because it can have impact on our mortality metrics. I also want to just pull out the fact that some of the fantastic learning from deaths work that has happened over the past months in the organization has paid dividends. There's overlap with some of the other big projects and quality work that we're doing, including maternity improvement, and our director of midwifery and head of learning from deaths were invited to the Embrace National Conference specifically to talk about this. So some really good work there. There's learning across the organization, which you can see in the paper. I just want to connect to some of the things that have been uncovered just related to impact of continuous flow in the context of the wider work that's happening now and the pools of continuous flow, and just triangulating the learning across different bits of our quality agenda. There's also an emerging issue which will require for us to look a little bit more closely in terms of just end-of-life care, recognition of lasting power of attorney, how colleagues are identifying that and operationalizing it in ensuring that patients get the right care from us, and things related to decision-making around ceilings of care that we just need to pay a bit more attention to. Back to structured judgment reviews, while we are at 75%, the other thing to note is we have now exceeded our self-imposed target of more than 10% of adult deaths to have a structured judgment review for the first time. We're at 14% of that, so that is an important sort of milestone for us. Other than that, worth noting that Salford Royal is one of our early adopters from the NHS England Acuity Standardisation project, so that changes how we assess patients at the front door. So that's worth noting, and we will monitor what the impact of that will be. Our mortality metrics, SHIMI, HSMR, etc. Again, we've over the, I think, probably the past 2 or 3 learning from deaths report have discussed this point. They continue to improve, and we had a good discussion at Quality and Performance Committee specifically around ensuring that we don't have any complacency around that, and to do some more in-depth analysis with external colleagues as well, just to have a bit of an understanding of whether there's any more that we can do to understand how we maintain that improvement and avoid any deterioration. The one metric that is going in the wrong direction that we're just keeping an eye on and trying to understand a little bit more, and has been an issue for us, is the out-of-hospital mortality indices, which is just heading in the wrong direction. With that, I will pause there and take any questions and comments.
Yeah, thank you. That was the one area I wanted to have further information, but I'll take Sue first. Sue, thank you, Rafiq.
Thank you. Rafiq, just for my own education, really, in what circumstances are deaths referred to the coroner?
There's a list of requirements, including, unexpected deaths. Trauma is an automatic referral to the coroner, where the cause of death cannot be determined. There's a set of criteria, Sue, which I'm very happy to share with colleagues.
Okay. Yeah. And is that it? Just so almost a third of our adult deaths were referred to the coroner. Is that right? Is that a high number, or is that the norm?
It will vary. So when the number becomes higher than we're used to, what we do is just look at the cases that have been referred, just to make sure that there's nothing in there that indicates that our care has drifted from the kind of quality care that we want to provide to patients. So it's just a trigger for us to further analyze rather than necessarily an indicator in itself that is of a concern.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. Tim, please, Chris, and then Tim.
Yeah, we obviously had a good look at this report at the Quality and Performance Committee. I think there's 2 things to sort of praise here. One is the proportion of structured judgment reviews now, Rafiq, that's gone up, as you say, above that sort of 10% benchmark, which is often used. So that's great to hear, and I understand that they've been done in a relatively timely way as well. So that's a great thing. And I think in the report you also see a number of examples of learning and dissemination of that learning, which as we had a conversation, didn't we, at Quality Committee, Rafiq, about how we sort of almost make those more obvious in the report in a sort of headline fashion, because I think there are some good things in there that have been learned from this sort of review process, and we should be making the most of that, so that, you know, almost like I think board members might need 2 or 3 of those things in their heads as themes that have come out of the review process, because I think it is good.
Thanks for that, Chris, and absolutely support that. And with the new sort of group structure that sits under QPC, one of the things that we are looking at is how we ensure that there's that cross-learning, because in the complexity of our organization, one of the challenges that we will always have is to ensure that when we learn something in one place, that it's disseminated elsewhere.
Yeah.
Points we were made in that, I know. Thank you for that. Tim, please.
Yeah, thanks, Rafiq. A really good report, particularly as you say, the piece on the themes from the Learning from Deaths forums. Mine was just again a point of clarity. I was speaking to another trust, and it just came up about structured judgment reviews. They have no compliance problems because they pay an additional PA to do them. And if they don't do them, they don't get paid. I kind of wondered what I'm not suggesting we do if we don't, but are we in line with other trusts in how we kind of encourage participation and engagement?
So different trusts have taken different approaches. This approach of paying people for doing that work has been discussed in the trust, and I think we discussed it at the board about a year ago. It isn't the route that we have decided to take, and the reason behind that is we see mortality reviews as a core bit of the quality responsibilities of our teams, and that's what we're supporting and encouraging. But we do need to monitor really carefully the compliance and consider alternative approaches if we aren't able to maintain them.
Yeah, I certainly support where we are, but it was just interesting to see how others do it. But I think what you're leading on there is the right approach. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. On a point of specificity, I think I just needed to draw the board's attention to the reference to the adverse impact of the clinical, the continuous flow model on patient care in Bury on the adult medical, the assessment medical unit for patients requiring end-of-life care. That certainly was something that was observed in Oldham when the CQC visited and led to our regulation 29A. And so I think it's good assurance that we are seeing that that's been picked up and addressed in the Learning from Deaths report. What I also, from a specifics point of view, the timing of this report, of course, is different to when we've put the stop on continuous flow. So it's to point out that we are not continuing with continuous flow, but the thematic analysis refers to a period before that. But good assurance that we are picking up this and ensuring the learning is spread beyond Oldham and Salford. But it's not evidence that we are continuing with continuous flow. Is it just me or
Chair,
I can't hear
we couldn't quite hear you. My lip reading skills extend to thinking that you just said Carmen, please, but we couldn't quite hear you.
My volume is very high on my computer. Is that better?
Yes, can hear you now, Rabina.
Yeah.
I need to shout.
Okay, thank you. This is a question, I think, to you, Rafiq. Do we have any form of regular audit or oversight process that gives us assurance around the highlight reports that we get from mortality leads, rather than just receiving the report and taking it as read?
Do you mean the reports from mortality leads at individual specialties that then feed into this report, Carmen?
Yes, I do.
Yes, those are quality assured by our learning from death teams, and they work very, very closely to support them in terms of ensuring that the reports are of the adequate quality and include all the detail that is required.
Thank you.
Are there any further comments or points? I can cover everything that's said, but in summary, it is right. The learning and how we embed that learning is absolutely crucial here. And I'm sure the board commends the progress being made in several areas that you've already identified. However, the identified risks, such as the Regulation 28 report, the depth of coding issues you mentioned, and the VTE risk assessment failures, continue to highlight critical areas regarding immediate action. So I'm hopeful. Can you still hear me? Yeah, good. I'm hopeful that the QPC will pick these areas up, including also the point you made around the out of hospital shimmy variations, which is also of concern. And coming back to the structured judgment review, I think it's right that we highlight, do we have the appropriate resources in place, particularly for Royal Oldham, to enable them to be compliant? I'll just make those observations. Thank you all.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. We move on then to agenda item 11.3, perinatal quality surveillance report. Heather, would you like to introduce this item? And I know that I can
Thank you, Rubina. Yeah, so thank you, Rubina, and welcome to Faith and Annabelle, who will be the subject matter experts presenting the paper. It's quite a comprehensive paper following the national guidance, with giving as much assurance as possible about the business as usual processes within our perinatal services, and also for this report gives evidence and assurance around our CNST process. I will hand you over to Faith and Annabelle, but I also want to draw some triangulation between one of the bits of information in the report and the earlier conversation we had about rescinding escalated rates within high acuity areas. You will see in the report reference to neonatal nursing staffing and the potential impact on our British Association of Perinatal Medicine accreditation compliance. And so that is evidence that where we saw that there was having an impact on safety, we have since reinstated escalated rates in that area. But I just wanted to do a bit of triangulation before our colleagues give more of the detailed clinical information. Faith, Annabelle.
Thanks, Heather, and good morning. It is still morning. Good morning, everyone. So this report has been through Quality and Performance Committee, and therefore assurance has been sought around the full paper as part of that committee. The thing that I really wanted to highlight to board today is around our proposed compliance and declaration with the Maternity Incentive Scheme Year 6. So you'll see within the report in the Appendix B that we are looking to declare full compliance with all 10 of the safety actions. The reason that it's slightly out of kilter is that we have a LMNS assurance checkpoint meeting, and part of the LMNS requirement is that they review externally and verify all of our presented evidence, and that is due to take place on the 23rd of January. In order to give board oversight to that, Heather has been invited to that meeting on your behalf, really, and what we're looking for today is an understanding that we will be presenting back to board the results of the LMNS assurance visit, but unfortunately that will be after the declaration's already been signed and submitted to NHS resolution. So it's slightly out of kilter with normal process. However, following discussions with QPC, but also with the LMNS, it has been agreed that we can do it in this order, and it is acceptable to NHS resolution and meets all of their requirements.
Just pause there and just go back and say that they have questions about that.
Sorry, Rubina, I couldn't hear you very well. Apologies.
I'm just asking, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Sorry. I just wanted to ask the board, based on the process you've just described, that we are happy with that process going forward. I think, yeah, we have a thumbs up. That's great. Thank you very much. It was appropriate to pause at that point. Craig, you have your hand up.
Yes, thanks, Chair. Faith, just to put a bit of context to one of the comments in the report, talks to the level of vacancies in maternity. You know, so we know that we've got vacancies to get there, but it talks about 54.7 whole-time vacancies and jobs offered 22. Is that something that someone sort of raise their eyebrow and go, what's the correlation there? Why we not got everything advertised? You know what I mean? And it might be I've missed the context as I've read through the report, so sorry, Faith, but I just wondered if someone's going to comment about that, seeing that report.
No, so that's the 22.64 are the jobs that we've currently got in offer. So all jobs are advertised up to our vacancy rate, but that's what we've been able to fill. We do have a rolling recruitment programme, and we are well supported by the recruitment team, particularly Caroline Gee, in terms of advertising our vacancies.
Right, so there's not been a constraint for you there. It's I just wanted to clarify. Right, thank you.
No, not at all. And you know, to the contrary, really, we have been supported to continue to recruit.
Yeah, thanks.
Would you like to continue with your?
Yeah, so that's really the highlights of the report. We are also, just so people on this call are aware, we are in the process of writing up our yearly perinatal mortality report. So that will come to board at the next meeting, which will give the full overview of the last 12 months. But I would like to just share that positively, we've had the lowest rate of stillbirth from 5 preceding years. So that is a significant improvement that I would just like to share as an early indicator from the review that we've done of this year.
Thank you. Actually, very important.
Oh, you've gone again, Rabina, for me. Sorry.
Can you hear me now? I don't know what's happening with my system. I apologise. I was just saying that was a really important comment to make around stillbirths, because ever since I've been on this board, it's nearly 2.5 years now, it's been an area of concern for us. And the fact we've been able to shift the dial positively is good to see. We need to continue those improvements, don't we? That's the point. But thank you to you and to Annabelle and to Andrew for the work you're doing around the leadership of this and the cultural shift you're making in terms of behaviours and ownership. Are there any other comments, colleagues, on this report from Faith, other than to capture the key recommendations that have already been made? I have a couple of comments to make at the end, but I see some more hands have gone up. Heather and then Chris, please.
So Chris, would you like to go first? Because I think you took your hand down and put it back up again. Do you want to go first? You're on mute, by the way.
That better.
Yeah.
I was only going to confirm Faith's comment that we'd had a good look at this data at the Quality and Performance Committee, and I think you know, would have been happy about the declaration and the process. So just to confirm that, Rabina.
Thank you very much for that, Chris. Okay, so are there any other observations, colleagues?
Yeah. If I may, and the risk of doing a bit of tautology is just to thank the team for the hard work, and the board would have been aware that we have been stepped down from a formal regulatory oversight process. So the rapid quality review process instigated by NHS England was formally stepped down on the 20th of December, and we've had written confirmation of that. And they're quite, which is quite an achievement and has been commented on by our colleagues in NHS England. So that's well done to the team. In addition to that, our efforts, or the team's efforts, this is the royal hour, the team's efforts have been recognised nationally, and they were presented at a national Embrace conference. So that is just to add to what Faith has said, that is really, really good evidence that this improvement has been noted. And the regional chief midwife, or the deputy regional chief midwife, has asked if Faith would be available to mentor other directors of midwifery. So this is, I think it needed to be minuted that this is quite a significant achievement. It is a team effort, and it has been recognised nationally and regionally as well.
Thank you, Heather. That was going to be my final comment, but you've said it so eloquently. So I'll add to all of you, to Faith and to Annabelle and to Andrew, and also to you, Heather, for your leadership and support to the wider team. That this is a tremendous accomplishment, and it does reflect a meaningful cultural shift. That was the point I was trying to make earlier on, that absolutely prioritises the needs of patients and their families. And we are deeply grateful for your contributions. So well done to you for this remarkable progress. Thank you. Can the board note then that the paper has been received, and all of the, Jude, your hand is up. Oh, she's making a positive comment for you, which is great. Can we move on then, colleagues, to the next item? Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Faith, Annabelle, for attending the meeting. We move on then to agenda item 11.4, adult social care and care delivery strategy update. I believe Charlotte is here, who's the Chief Officer for Salford Care Organisation, David Williams, Head of Service for Learning Disability, Transition, Sensory and Adult Social Care, Learning and Development and Business Support, and Martin Sexton, Head of Service, Social Work Standards and Quality Assurance. Have I captured you all well? Did you hear me, colleagues?
Yes.
I'm having problems with my audio. Thank you very much. So Heather, would you like to introduce this item, and then I believe Charlotte's going to, and colleagues will take us through.
I'm not going to do it justice if I do, actually. If the colleagues are here, just to thank them for the engagement, the time and effort that was taken to help Salford more widely, and the NCA create this vision for adult social care and the implementation plan behind that. And just so that the board is aware, colleagues are very much prepared and enthusiastic and willing to meet with the board in a workshop scenario to help us contribute to this vision as key stakeholders, and that is being planned, so that will again contribute to the development of the strategy. And that's what I will say before I hand over to Charlotte, Martin and David.
Thank you, Rabina, and thank you, Heather. So as Heather was saying, the purpose of the report today is around assurance that there's a development of a vision for adult social care, and that will then be followed with a board engagement session around that vision, and a composite report that we'll bring back to the board in March that will show the vision to action plan, and also the assurance around how that has and will continue to address the areas that were raised in the initial reviews circa 2 years ago. Just want to quickly say before I hand over to Martin and to David about why we have put a new vision in place and why now. First off, we do operate quite a traditional model of social work in Salford, and we are an outlier in a number of areas, including we're not in the place we want to be in terms of use of our direct payments and our use of care homes. So the traditional model, we want it to flip into a much more 21st century operating model for adult social care.
We also need to align all of our partners. It's not just about adult social care as a service itself that delivers to our older people in our communities, but a range of partners, and the vision will unite those partners together on a single set of principles and a single plan. And also, if any of you do track the census, you'll have noticed that Salford has had one of the largest population growths in England during the last 2 census periods, 22% population growth, and particularly a younger population. And what we're seeing particularly is that more younger people are accessing adult social care. We've also had a change in demographics around the growth of our Muslim population. So actually how we provide our adult social care services to that growing population is really important in terms of the vision that we've had. And of course, our older adults are living longer with more complex long-term conditions as well. So it's really important that we have a 21st century vision for adult social care. Just quickly, the why now is that the first year of our improvement journey was around back to basics. We didn't want to launch a new vision before actually getting some of the fundamentals in place first. So our year 1 focused on things like staffing levels, our data, and our freedom to speak up and supporting the morale of our staff. This year's focus has been around the engagement around developing that vision and launching it. And on that note, I'm going to hand over to Martin to talk about how that vision's been developed, and then to David, who'll say a little bit about the impact for our patients.
Great. Thanks very much, Charlotte. Good morning, everybody. So Charlotte said that I'm the principal social worker and the professional lead for social work, but also got overall responsibility for our social care standards, practice, and quality assurance. So quickly take you through the story so far, the developments of this vision. Obviously, we start with our core values and our legal responsibilities set out principally in the Care Act and the Human Rights Act and other relevant legislation. That's the kind of foundation of practice with adults. We looked at some examples from other local authorities. It's always good to get examples of how things are presented, how things are articulated and made clear, and get good clear use of language. So we drew some inspiration from some examples of local authorities who are acknowledged to have made some good progress in the areas that Charlotte's described. And then we've spoken to a wide range of stakeholders, obviously our staff. We hold a number of engagements with staff, giving everybody the opportunity to take part in this process, to contribute what they think they want to see in the vision. And I think as PSW, it's very important that the values apply to the staff as well as to the residents of Salford. We've also had conversations with Becky Wilkinson, the Director of Adult Social Care in Salford, with the Salford Care Organisation Board, and consultation with our community partners, particularly the ones that we have commissioning relationship with, so Mind and GADAM, and also Salford Community and Voluntary Service. I describe that as consultation rather than co-production. I think we wanted to get a sense from them, are we on the right track? Does this look like something that's meaningful and something we can be held to account with? We're well aware that the next steps, the actions, the service developments will need to be co-produced with stakeholders and residents. So that's clearly understood by us, I think. And culminating in the document that has been shared with you, which, as you can see, is a pretty high level description of what we're about, why we're here, what our values are, what are the behaviours that we think we need to put into practice, both internally with each other and with our residents to deliver these improvements, and the various metrics by which will be measured and sources of information that we need to be relying on and inflecting on to be held accountable for this and to continue the service improvements that we're seeking to make. So that's how we've got to where we are. That's what's gone into it so far, and a sort of very, very quick introduction to where we're hoping to go next. And so on that note, I'll hand over to Dave to tell you a bit more about what the operational impact is already, and also where we're hoping to go next.
Thanks very much, Martin and Charlotte. I think hopefully that you also got attached the case studies that we put into the papers. And I think we thought it was really important to put those in because obviously we're aware of reviews that happened a couple of years ago. And actually that's a great example of 3 of our staff. And we've got more staff who could provide those case studies, just to assure you it's not just 3. That can actually
start to notice the difference and what they're delivering and how they're supporting people. And I think trying to kind of link lots of things across the kind of any integrated system is really important. So we often have things like schemes about days kept away from home. And the last word about that's really important. It's home, isn't it? That's where we feel happier. That's where we want to be. So how does adult social care continue to work with the system to support people to be in home as long as they can, be discharged from hospital as quickly and as safely as they can back to home? And where we talk about home, it's there. And then if that person does need something more formally commissioning, how do we make that kind of still to be maximising our independence as we all grow older, rather than thinking, oh, actually, how do we stop people doing things? It's not about that. It's about how we encourage people to have a really good quality of life through their whole lifespan, whether we need kind of acute import adult social care import, we should be striving to maximise people's quality of life. And that's hopefully where our vision starts, that we really want some really positive outcomes for people. And then that hopefully then leads to the vision and then the outcomes for the services and delivery. But if we start with people, we often can get there the right way. And it's how we use the vision now to set the culture for our staff to start thinking of new ways of working rather than how we do things the same, because sometimes the same is the easiest because you've been doing it, and sometimes that cultural shift is that real challenge of how we do things differently. How do we use things like technology, because that's there's kind of lots of things about the NHS app this week. How do we use other terms of technology in adult social care to enable that person to stay again at home? So we want to kind of use this vision as a starting point for outcomes for people, and also then we know if we get those right, then the system delivery will come through that, and then the teams will be kind of really hopefully excited about the work that they can put in, and they see that improvement in people's lives, and then that makes us an even more attractive place to work. So you kind of get that kind of evolving cycle of outcomes for people often will deliver really good positive outcomes for systems, services, but also our staff and our workforce. And that's what I was going to add to the bit.
Thank you both. And just quickly to finish off, in terms of the next steps, it's around the launch of the vision. Sadly, that's a little delayed as our Director of Adult Social Care and our Managing Director, one has been off sick and one has left us. So we're slightly delayed in that launch, but like I say, we'll have that engagement session with the board. I think February, we're looking to schedule that with yourselves, and then we'll bring that composite report back in March. So happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Charlotte and David. Make some comments. I'm going to invite Jeff to speak first of all. Jeff?
Thanks, Ravina. A few points, if I may. First of all, I can't see in this vision a real focus on the reason why this trust provides adult social care. There are very few NHS acute trusts in the country, in England, that is, that are providers of adult social care. We are one of those very few. And it's not coming across to me in this vision why that's the case. The original purpose of transferring these functions from the council to this trust back in 2016, and the 400 staff that came with those functions, was to integrate adult social care services with community health, with primary care, with community mental health, in order that patients and their families and their carers were receiving a joined up service. We know that too often patients and their families suffer because of the chaos caused by well-meaning and expensive public services going into their homes in a completely disjointed way. Care assistants, physios, district nurses, mental health workers, the GP might pop in, but they don't talk to each other. And the purpose of this set of functions coming to this trust was to stop that and have lead workers. And I can't see that being reflected in the vision. Secondly, before we sign off a new vision and a strategy to go forward, I would suggest that the trust needs to review whether this is the right way to achieve that integration. If you look at our other localities in Rochdale, Oldham and Bury, we are trying to achieve that integration not by the acute sector of the NHS employing the staff and being the statutory provider, but instead by co-locating staff from adult social care with community health staff in the NHS, and linking them to primary care and community mental health staff. And with those staff being co-located, having single line management, but alongside that, very clear lines of professional accountability for safeguarding and staff development back to the DAS in the local authority. So there are other ways of doing this, which we are applying in this trust. And I can see no comparator here, which is the best way. We've been doing this for probably nearly 10 years now as a trust, which is the best way to achieve integration. And I can see no analysis of that. And I personally want to see an analysis of that. And whether those different ways of working are achieving not only the integration, but whether that integration is being measured in terms of its impact on patients and their families, its impact on reduced days kept away from home, therefore reduced days in hospital, reduced admissions to care homes, and also the cost per patient per client in each of the four localities. So I'd want to see more of a review of whether this is the right thing to do at all before we sign off a vision. So I'm pleased there's going to be some more board engagement on this. I would personally look for that engagement to be quite fundamental in its scope. Thank you.
Yes, and Owen, I'm glad that your hand is up.
Yeah, just some thoughts for me. I was in the place of trying to think, when we talk about this as a vision, is this a vision that is a part of Salford Council's vision of place? And also, where does this sit in terms of our own vision, I guess, as an organisation? And there's just a little bit for me where I'm just trying to think about where it fits. My instinct would be that Salford as a place will have a vision, and my instinct would be that this should be talking to that. And I guess the reason why I'm sort of posing both those questions as queries is that I think whatever happens, it shouldn't just be a standalone vision for the provision of adult social care. I think that is us missing an opportunity to talk about the contribution either to place, either to organisation, GM space, whatever. So there's just a little bit for me about, are we just talking about something that's really just about the service, or are we talking about something that really is supposed to be contributing to a wider remit than just a service around that? Just some questions. Thanks.
Charlotte, would you like to begin to comment?
Yeah, comment on some of those, and it's not straightforward, and I think that those questions that both Jeff and Owen that you've raised are really sensible ones. And whose vision is it? I think what Martin articulated quite well was that it's not a vision about a service. It's actually a vision to connect lots of different agencies to a single set of principles so that we can work collectively together for our older people. So it's not about a vision for just those people who are employed through an adult social care service. It's a much wider collective of people. And that very much links to the neighbourhood model developments that are happening within Salford locality, We aren't as far ahead as places like Rochdale, but we've taken lots of work to try and get to that place. So within Salford, we've got a number of pieces of work with something called Community Solutions, which is a council piece of work that is predominantly focused on children's service in their community assets. There's also a piece of work around place, and then there's the adult social care. And as a partnership, actually all those three are coming together to be able to make sure that the neighbourhoods is that overarching umbrella, but then the clear statutory duties of adult social care as part of that neighbourhoods approach are clear. So there's alignment between this vision and those wider neighbourhood developments that are happening, but we're not as far ahead as places like Rochdale. I think, you know, Jeff, in terms of bringing back that question that you posed, I think if we can explore that during that development session as well and bring some of those back. We haven't looked at a period where we've analysed across the areas at Bury, Rochdale, Salford and Oldham to look at actually what have the difference in impact been. What I know, and I think, you know, if the people that have visited, if you go to City Approach, you do see our adult social care, you know, with teams, our paediatric services, our district nurses, our community teams, our single point of access for the community co-located in centres together. Some of those are more integrated for some neighbourhoods compared to others, and they are very much part of that integrated care division and very much part of that. And you know, today, as part of some work we're doing in hospital discharge, you know, having the team with us, you know, doing some direct work immediately has been really, really helpful. So there's different advantages, but I think we need to do that piece of work, Jeff. I think it's a good call.
Thank you. My understanding of the presentation today was for you to speak to the development you've made so far and the progress that you have made. And actually, I think you've done incredibly well to get to this point, because we've been waiting for this information for a very long time. The alignment, the integration, and the wider vision. How is it integrated within the NCA? Is it a partner? You know, are we one voice? All of these matters are very important. My understanding is that the ask from you is to come back with a refined and updated version, which will then be further discussed with the board, so we can reach that common understanding and appreciation of where this vision really wants to take us. Is it reflective of all of the thoughts and challenges and the opportunities we've described today, including what you've also mentioned? Does it illustrate the success stories that you know, I think really describes the potential in action, providing this compelling evidence that we need to see and have evidence of about how further innovative we can be in improving that integration point. There are also gaps, aren't there, in some of the assurance and the follow-up actions, particularly around the Section 75 KPIs. That is an area of concern for us, and we need to be mindful that we remain focused on developing those KPIs to support the joint accountabilities within Salford Council. And I feel that this particular emphasis needs to be expedited to ensure that we are compliant with our Care Act standards. So I feel at this moment, colleagues, if you all agree that this is a paper to note in terms of work in progress, and that we come back for a further discussion and conversation which identifies and explores some of the things that have already emerged from this conversation, but also builds on the great work you've already done. So thank you, Charlotte, Martin and David, and looking forward to further iterations of this before we sign off the vision as a board. Is that helpful?
Yeah. Yes, thank you.
Right, thank you very much indeed for attending the meeting. Thank you for your time, and my thanks to your wider teams as well for the continued work that you're doing. Days kept away from home is really exemplary of what we can achieve when we're working well. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Goodbye. I believe we're now at agenda item 11.5. Jude, annual planning.
Yes, I don't think there's much to say on this. It's a placeholder. I think the financial workings out as we iterate the plan, the people numbers, and certainly I've taken the performance metrics, have all gone through their respective board committees. We've got a strategy day in February just to start to pull this together for us. As everybody will be aware, we are doing it in the absence of any planning guidance, although we have had some documentation on the ambitions for elective recovery that landed this week. So that will help start to inform our thinking. I'm expecting the guidance this week, but who knows? From what's in front of us, the ICB have pushed back next week's submission a further week, and I think that's largely driven by the fact that the ICB financial sustainability plan is a way away from where it needs to be, and so there are further conversations needed with finance directors across the patch. So that's back from the 15th, I think it was, to the 22nd, although they're not really delaying the final dates of submission, but I think that really depends on what comes out in the operating, the planning guidance. So I think the 3rd of February is our opportunity. I think question for the board from me, last year we sort of presented that performance plan, the people elements of it, and the finance, and how we'd done the triangulation. And then we also heard from some of our clinical leaders really around the capacity and demand work that they've done at service level. So question about whether we want to hear from a couple of those services again, and probably I'm going to suggest the ones that are really challenged in recovery. So neurology is emerging as a pressure for us. ENT is another one that's challenged across the system. And my other thought would be gynecology, given where we have been in gynecology and the work that we need to do to unify those teams and think about their capacity across. Those would be my thoughts, but happy if the board wants to take a different direction for that day.
I'll comment on that point, Jude. Just invite Craig first of all, and then I will.
Yeah, just a little further context to the financial situation Jude referred to. So I think in the main, when we've collected, we being the provider trusts and the ICB, for a first pass, let's say, of where we stand at the moment, the two main drivers that has taken us away from where we originally thought we were meant to be are around the shortfall on recurrent CIP that some trusts have now sort of said, if we shut shop today, so to speak, this is where we'd land, and it would be similar to us sort of saying, if we land where we are today, i.e. 30 odd million instead of 64.2, there's a shortfall. So everyone's sort of done that kind of articulation, and that drives the problem worse. And then also what we alluded to earlier around some recurrent pay award pressures. So there's two things when I've looked at the analysis of where the current ICB position is in the main that drive them, and those are the two. However, there will be further work, as Jude said, by the GM DOFs around what subsequent emerging pressures that might have recurrent impact would be into next year, that needs to be done as well to fully understand the true start position. And like we've talked about earlier, from a people planning point of view, like us, people have had mitigation plans that have taken them away from the original plan, but to try and achieve it may have reduced the reliance or expectation on headcount reduction and pushed it more into a non-pay sort of reliance on CIP. Therefore, I think there will be a bit of a reset, as we've talked about earlier, and Gertie knows this, around sort of where we're going to start our position for next year on the people planning. So we are in line. There's nothing out of sync in terms of the Northern Care Alliance with the main themes that I've described, but it does mean, it does start to explain quite rapidly how we've moved so far when you add all those issues up and aggregate them across the system, if that provides a bit more context.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, Ravina, I can't hear you now.
I said that was a really helpful insight and an update, so thank you. I was going to invite Jeff now to comment.
Thanks, Ravina. Yeah, really helpful paper. We had a good session as a development session for the board before Christmas on how we meet our statutory duties in relation to health inequalities, and through that contribute to prevention. When, if at all, will that be played into this planning process?
So there are some elements, Jeff, I think you raised when we had that session at the board strategy day, about where do we place focus, you know, so what's the responsibilities of the ICB local authority, in particular when we start to talk about inequalities and population health, and where do we put focus? And I think we talked about some areas of planned care where we can focus. If you look at the document that's landed this week, there are some elements in there that start to point us to gathering information on housing and taking some of things into consideration. So I think we need to start to determine, as we set the objectives as part of the annual planning, that under health inequalities, population health, what's the objectives that we want to really focus on and the deliverables in year. So you know, maybe as part of the 3rd of February, we have a bit of a conversation, and I would urge board members to go back to the paper I think that we brought when we last met about our annual plan objectives, where we've got to, and what do we build on next year. And we can you know, we can build that into the day about how do we have a conversation about objectives, and maybe pull 1 or 2 areas out. You know, let's be honest, the performance objectives are a given to us, but let's pull 1 or 2 areas out where it's in our gift to determine what's the level of our ambition in a year.
Yeah, I think that's a very helpful point again. We need to really focus on our health inequalities and the alignment that's required. So Jude, thank you for that further update. Can I suggest then, well, first of all, thank you, Jude, for the development and the description, along with Craig, of the next steps to develop the 2025-26 annual plan. I recognise it going backwards that when we were doing the 2024-25, we did identify ENT and ophthalmology as emerging risk areas, actually, didn't we? So there's something about looking backwards in order to look forward and make sure we do provide clarity in the objectives that we set, and we're very clear about what they mean and how they're going to be presented. I think given the uncertainties surrounding national guidance, which has already been described, that while progress is evident, significant risks remain, particularly around the financial sustainability, the national and local planning assumptions, and the delivery of performance targets, and they've all been contextualised in this conversation thus far. So I think the next iteration and conversation will be in February, as you've described, Jude, and I think colleagues from urology and ENT and gynecology would be very helpful to hear their perspectives and take that learning forward and help to inform how we set our objectives on our for 25-26. Is that okay with everybody? Let me take it.
Thanks, Ravina. Just for completion, for board members, it is Council of Governors on Monday, and so I'm just going to be inviting Council of Governors to have a conversation about objectives and, you know, from constituents, what are the key 1 or 2 priorities that they would urge us to consider as part of the development of our plan. So I'll bring their outputs into the board session too.
Yeah, I'm really pleased that that's been actioned, because it is important to take our Council of Governors with us on this journey. We are setting design principles and objectives going forward, and they need to be part of that conversation because they will add real value, I'm sure. So thank you, Jude. Thank you, colleagues. We move on then to people in education.
Aziz, agenda item 12.1, please.
Thank you. We have two reports from meetings on 20th November and 18th December meetings. I'll take those reports as read. I really just wanted to highlight one major issue, and that's sickness. There was actually a drop in sickness in November after some steep rises in July, but it's still well above the 6% target. And, you know, this month we know that it's probably going to go up again with all the flu around. We continue to work on getting managers to do the return to work conversations with staff who've been off sick, because we know these conversations are really important for staff wellbeing. And we heard from Bury Care Organisation this time. We hear from different care organisations at each people committee. And, you know, we heard from Jo Forkas and her team, and, you know, really impressed by the work that they're doing. You know, and we know that their appraisal rate has been above 90% since September. But their focus on sickness has really paid off. And we ask that this learning be shared by the care organisations. Just quickly, you know, bite-sized manager training on topics, including things like reasonable adjustment, their focus on support for staff with long-term conditions, support for managers in having challenging conversations, and their focus on the divisions where the metrics weren't on track, that the senior management team would be talking to those divisions about those particular metrics and what they were doing about them. We've asked all care organisations to come up with an improvement plan in terms of, well, Gertie has anyway, and you know, we will hope that they're going to learn from this best practice across the organisation, and actually to focus on getting my time appraisal conversations to above the 90% target, because we know that makes a really big difference on staff wellbeing. And that was all I wanted to highlight, really.
Thank you very much indeed for that, Aziz, and for appreciate how hard our staff work to achieve the outcomes we do. Then we'll ask Gertie, are there any further comments you'd like to make before I go to colleagues to see whether there are any questions or comments they would like to make?
I'll just very briefly add to Aziz's point is that this is particularly around the welcome back conversations, which is what we title our return to work conversations. The real focus I'm bringing to that through the SMT meetings, so the senior management team meetings for public members, so that I'm asking our care organisations to share with us their compliance rates and monitoring that now monthly as we go through those SMTs, because again, we know that what we monitor, we see improvements in. For me, all of the people metrics are incredibly important. You know, I wouldn't want a relentless focus on improving absence to mean that our training rates drop off or our my time compliance drop off. So there is some really good work starting around that, and just to assure board colleagues that it is being actively managed through the SMT. But other than that, happy to take any questions if there are any. Thank you, Chair.
Are there any comments or questions for either Aziz or Gertie? I think you're quite right. The comment you made latterly around all the performance metrics on people are equally important, aren't they? And I think we just need to maintain that focus and seek the assurance through the People and Education Committee, as we have done in the past. Sickness absence, of course, is important. Dependency is important, and all of the other things are equally require our focus, don't they? So we'll continue to receive updates from you, and the assurance that underpins those updates appropriately. Thank you very much for that, Aziz and Gertie. Agenda item 13.1, Carmen, research and innovation, please.
Thank you, Rabina. Again, I will take the report as read by everybody. I'm conscious that in the last board meeting in November, and I wasn't present at that meeting, I was away, there was some discussion about whether there was enough focus on research at this Research and Innovation Committee. I will highlight that there are a number of items that come to this meeting, and in the work plan, the focus on research comes at various points in the year, and there was a determined focus in December at the meeting on research. So I'll highlight a few things, particularly in the alert section. We had the R&I strategy annual update, which is the plan is year 3 of a 5-year plan strategy. The size of the current research facility at Salford isn't providing the current capacity to grow in line with the commercial work that we expect to come in, and the facilities are limiting our opportunity to grow that high value early phase trial portfolio. So we had some discussion about how that might move forward, and the leaders who came to present on that have informed us that we are already having discussions between the estates facilities and the R&I team about how that could possibly be resolved. So that's been alerted to the board. The annual strategy has grown, the commercial activity has grown by 20% in this financial year, which is a good thing, but of course we're going to need the space to be able to make that happen. And this has been highlighted previously. There is a financial impact in the loss of North Care funding, so the charities funding for the research centre, and that's something that's still under discussion, and we need to have an outcome on that at some point. I don't think it's been fully discussed yet at charitable funds, although Jeff may change my view on that, because I don't think it's come to that committee yet. And then there's a lot of information in the report about all of the great work that the R&I team are doing, all of the recruitment of participants that's taken place, and all of the achievements that have taken place. And I do want to call out a big thank you to everybody in the research space for all of the work that they've been doing, because we really are showing that we can make a difference. I'll stop there.
Thank you.
I can't hear you, Rubina.
Thank you, Carmen.
Thank you.
Thank you. Rafiq and then Sue, please.
Yeah, just a brief additional comment from me. I just wanted to note as well that the 20% increase in commercial activity from a research perspective is bucking the GM and national trend. So GM is seeing a decrease in the space. So I just want to emphasize the hard work that the team have done and how successful they have been in that space.
Thank you.
Sue, please.
So
thanks. Unfortunately, I wasn't at the last board meeting either, and I read about the concern expressed around the lack of R&I discussed at the R&I committee. But I have to say, the last committee compensated for that. It was a terrific meeting, and it was news to me how fantastic the NCA's research effort really is. And I couldn't help but feel it's taken me a year at NCA to understand that all this research activity is going on, despite being on the committee. And that maybe we should be making more of it as an organisation, because it's certainly, I think, something to be proud of. The issue around turning away commercial trials, that I found that really worrying. I've never worked anywhere in the NHS where commercial trials would be turned away. I mean, normally everyone's flat out trying to get more of them. And so I think we really need to try and resolve this estates issue. And it has been rumbling on, I think, through the last few R&I committees, and they never seem to progress any further forward. So I suppose just to put a stake in the ground for research, I think Carmen said there is going to be a board development day, and you know, it strikes me as something we should be really, really proud of in this organisation.
I agree with you. There's been a lack of visual absence for in how important research is to us, and the evidence of that would come from inviting colleagues to speak to the work that they've been doing, because there's so much activity here, and the innovation that resounds from it. We talked earlier on, didn't we, about sharing learning. Shared learning comes from research outcomes, actually, and improved service delivery and service outcomes and better experience for patients and staff welfare, all in the round. So yeah, I think I welcome the opportunity to have that wider board discussion on all of the elements
Carmen. Your points were really well made, and so was Sue's. Jeff, would you like to come in, please?
Yeah, thanks. So it's struggling to get off mute then. The answer to Carmen's question about funding from the North Care charity, I think, is that it's been caught up in a wider review of recurring funding, and therefore it's not been specifically discussed by the Charitable Funds Committee, other than we've seen a reference to it in relation to that wider review. I, as chair, will go back and get that disconnected from that wider review and make sure we have a single item on this grant either at or before the next meeting and get it unblocked.
Thank you, that's much appreciated.
Thank you. Are there any other points, colleagues? Really important report and very well presented. Thank you and all the presenters on the chairs of the subcommittee. Really grounding and important to demonstrate how we monitor our own progress and how we seek assurance. We'll also celebrate the fantastic work that does happen in NCA and acknowledge that in all of the different elements we've been discussing this afternoon. Now we're going into the afternoon. So thank you for that. Chris, sorry, not Chris, audit, please, next Tim, if that's okay. Agenda item 14.1.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, I'll just be brief. So this relates to the well, we've got a new title now, Audit and Risk Committee, and I think that is important. It kind of gives a better connection, I think, and line of sight for the non-executives on the risk management arrangements. So there's now a biannual kind of connection through Heather, the chief nurse, to get an understanding of the risk management framework and to look at the overall arrangements. So we'll see that developing, I think, over the next couple of meetings. But just to talk to the principal recommendations on the cover sheet, we've already referred to the patient consent audit. So it is important to note that the committee did not kind of approve extension of those timeframes as a point of principle, but we were assured in respect of the chief medical officer's attendance there and preceding that at the QPC with regard to getting a focus and a grip and the mitigating actions in respect of that. Positive position on audits in respect of substantial assurance for cost improvement, which again, given our focus and on that, we do need to have that assurance of the underlying confidence in the leadership and the processes and the arrangements, and with duty of candour, similarly a substantial assurance in a key area. One where there is a limited assurance relates to equality, diversity and inclusion, and that has been referred through to people in education to kind of drill down into that. And discharge planning that Jude referred to earlier, rather than force a kind of heavy action plan in a fairly fast moving area, the learning from that report is going into the development work around discharge planning, but will come back to the audit committee. So those are the main things in terms of the key audits that have come through. There's a list of updates at the top of which we had many of at the top of the AAA report. But one I'd only flag, we did the deep dive into maternity, as Heather referred to earlier. And I think after the external review that Faith referred to in an earlier agenda item, we will look at that again as a committee, and Heather will report in, I guess, in that and to QPC about how we look at the risk score again. And that talks to the previous point we had around the board assurance framework needing to be dynamic and responsive to changes and improvements in control and reducing gaps in assurance. So that's all I talked to there. The AAA report does cover all the updates and other areas of focus, but they're the main matters I wanted to flag.
Thank you very much, Tim. That was a very comprehensive report, actually, and thank you for that further updates regarding those items, the recommendations, the alerts. Can I ask colleagues, are there any comments or questions for this report? I think the
the Audit and Risk Committee should be commended for its diligent oversight, actually, of key risk areas and internal audit actions. And as you have described and said, there remain significant concerns which you have addressed around the overdue actions, the EDI progress, particularly of note, and the discharge planning, which required immediate attention to ensure compliance. So I think you've updated us appropriately. Can the board accept all the recommendations that we needed to note in totality? Okay, thank you very much indeed, colleagues. We move then on to change portfolio, agenda item 15.1. Owen, would you like to introduce your reports, please?
Thank you, Chair. And if I could say to colleagues that I'm effectively going to cover off the documentation that covers from 15.1A to 15.1B2, and then Louise will pick up in respect of 15.2 on that. I am, in terms of talking around this, going to assume that the documentation has been read, particularly that we've got a kind of a catch-up report in December, and also catching up on a report in November as well. So I'm going to try and talk to themes, if that's okay. I think one of the things that across these Change Portfolio Board reports that we have had a sort of a continual focus on is one of our key bolder items, which relates to the clinically led model. I think one of the things that, when we can even see it across November and December, we continue to make some, firm progress around some of that, and particularly some of the underpinnings about the possibility of programme delivery. Again, I don't want to overlay what the independent assurance perspective that Louise will bring, but I think you can see even across these two documents of November and December, some movement, and if people remember back to October again, a sense of direction of travel around the clinical leadership model, which is encouraging, but still work to do. Probably some areas that are also feeding through, not just to the Change Portfolio Board, but also to our cost improvement planning process, where we still need to do some work, is the sort of broad heading of clinical service excellence, but the three sub-elements that sit within that, being outpatients, UEC, and theatres. And indeed, if we extrapolate to our most recent cost improvement conversation just this week around those three areas, I think we got to a position where we agreed that we would minimise our expectation, particularly in terms of cost improvement delivery, around the three programmes of urgent emergency care, outpatients and theatres excellence. But we wanted to take the learning from this to make sure that how we prepare and think about these pieces of work for the period to come in terms of 25-26, we've got more alignment perhaps between the operational element of it and the financial elements of these pieces of work. So perhaps we can set some realistic targets, particularly in terms of the cost improvement elements of it, as well as the service delivery improvements that sit within that. So those three areas and sub-elements of clinical service excellence are places where we do want to learn. I think we've accepted where we've got to in terms of 24-25, but we want to learn to make sure that we're sharper moving forward. I think, and Rafik may want to speak to this at a point in time. If you said to me, what's the programme when I sit as chair of the Change Portfolio Board that probably has got my highest attention, it would be the medical workforce programme. From my perspective, that is something that is not where we need it to be, both in terms of programme clarity, but also potentially ambition, and particularly the role that it will play in the context of delivering the FSP. So there's work to do around that. And again, I don't want to sort of overarch with what Louise may want to say around some of that, but I did want to register that. I think in terms of the other sleep of papers that are in there, I think Jeff will recall in particular that there's been a number of times when we've been having the conversation about the capacity to deliver on this whole portfolio of work. And therefore we did take the opportunity to have some really good discussions, first at the Change Portfolio Board, relating to sort of portfolio alignment, as we've called it. And then also we took the opportunity to extend that conversation further at a senior management team meeting. And what you've got in the suite of documentation here is that you have got a minute from the conversation that we had, which is a really good conversation actually, because we use the VMOS, so the vision, mission, sort of strategy framework, to kind of understand where all this work sits and what's our likelihood and confidence about capacity to deliver. I think from my point of view, one of the things that heartened me from that set of conversations, particularly at the senior management team, is I don't think, and I did ask the question, I think towards the end, are we all eyes wide open about the challenges that we face, about some of the interdependencies of the programs, and are we all thinking consciously, knowing that there's going to be some capacity issues? Are we thinking consciously about that, knowing that given the fiscal position that we've got, the ability to draw in external capacity, or for example, the ability to rely on our own internal capacity is going to be stressed at a point in time. The only other points I would just add, and that this particularly refers to the piece that is 15.1b2, which is the presentation that we considered at the senior management team discussions. And particularly in that slide plaque, there is slides that refer to on page 9 of 11 of that, the sort of portfolio coherence. And one of the things that we were really giving attention to is, what work in terms of the clinically led model needs to be progressed. Certainly, for example, to help us be in a favourable place in terms of implementing the electronic patient record, for example. So we took a lot of discussion around that, and we made a commitment to kind of stick to that particular plan on a page, which is slide 9 of 11. And then we also, in terms of that pack, we made a kind of a focus around the timelines and what would need to happen in terms of the CLM mobilisation to make sure that that all works together. Now, I have to say to you, there could be 6 months from now, and we look back at this and we say, do you know what? It's shifted because some of this is a bit of a moving feast, but we have taken a conscious decision to really look at how all this works together and to try and attempt to say, well, how does our capacity match that? We know there is a shortfall in the capacity to probably, and then the ability to deliver this. But I guess what I'm just reflecting is we're having those conversations and we are trying to be eyes wide open. So a bit word salady, I must admit, but it's quite a lot of complexity going into this particular aspect. So I'll take any questions, and then Louise may want to then continue 15.2. Sue.
Thank you very much, Owen. Sue, you have a question?
Thanks, Owen. I understand the issues about adjusting our expectation around savings from some of the big programs, but I suppose I'm now struggling to see where our savings are going to come from over the next 2 years. We've, as far as I can see, we've reduced our savings expectation from the target operating model. We don't appear to have any savings anticipation from the clinically led model, and we've now massively reduced our expectations from the service improvement schemes. We don't have much to go on in nursing. would you be able to share where you think most of our savings are going to come from in future years? And do you feel there's enough slack left in the care organisations to deliver savings from transactional schemes?
So I would say, and I'm nicking a little bit of Joe's language here, if you look at where the core delivery and the sizable scale of our in-year performance and what I think will continue for the next 2 or 3 years, Sue, we're largely talking about the work that happens at that care org level. Where we struggle, and I think it's reflected, for example, in the clinical services excellence, we struggle when it becomes cross-organisational. That's where we become challenged. So I've got confidence that we will see from our care organisation, we will see a continued bit of delivery. And I think one of the things that certainly Joe has taught me in this process is not to always be seduced by the big programmes, to understand that some of this is about the amalgamation of smaller programmes and getting into the habit of doing that. So I think we will, and we were talking at the cost improvement planning process, our meeting, that, we think we can set a trajectory of building what 25, 26 looks like, but it's going to be about an amalgamation of smaller schemes as a proportion to the big transformative schemes, which sound very nice, but are really hard to deliver, as we've experienced. So I've got confidence that we can keep working through the care orgs, but there does come a point, Sue, and I would say, from my point of view, it looks more like 26, 27, if I'm honest, where that just simply will not be enough. And by then, we will have to have been thinking about something quite significant. If you said to me, well, what is that now? I think there's still work to do on that. And I would like to think that we can use 25, 26 to have a go further at some of these cross-organisational schemes to see whether we can get more juice out of those. But as I say, right now, I'm more reliant on the smaller, cumulative, small things building up and aggregating, driven by the care orgs, certainly to get us near where we need to be for 25, 26. But I accept that that will not be enough, certainly for 26, 27. So kind of a half answer there, but there's still more work to do, I'm afraid.
Can I just come back to Owen on that? Because I was being a bit of a devil's advocate in that question, because I actually agree with you. My whole experience in the NHS of SIP programmes has always been that the savings are made through the very unsexy, everyday, keeping at it, reducing cost, but that the powers that be like to talk about big transformational schemes, and while they sound great in principle, are really, really hard to deliver. So I've got a lot of sympathy for the way we're going forward, but I suppose it does mean that we really need to drive those, and I know we have the mechanisms set up for that. But I say my whole experience, my career in the NHS, that these big, grand transformational schemes deliver very little in terms of cash out. But the days are gone where you could just create additional income, aren't they? So it's I've got a lot of sympathy for your response.
Thank you, Sue. Jude, please.
Yeah, thanks. I do just want to provide some clarity on the CSE, Park Urgent Care, because I think I've talked about that earlier about beds out. But I think the conversation that we had was a little bit about, we already put an efficiency gain, if you like, in through the baseline plan. So we built in efficiency by saying we are going to deliver more activity and therefore generate more ERF income this year by investing in £5 and making £10, if you like. So the 5 million ERF that was in the baseline, that yes, we put some some investment in to deliver, but not for everybody, was already in an efficiency scheme, and then on top of the CIP. So there's something about where do we just see in our planning this year the benefits of outpatients and theatre efficiency at service line level in the baseline plan. So actually for each service, what is the more that we are expecting you to deliver for the budget that we set? So, you know, that in itself is an efficiency. We're asking people to do more with the same money. It's about how do we capture that within the programme. What I would want to say, though, is the programmes are still valid as change programmes. So whilst the SIPs need to be developed and determined at service line level, and on the back of the elective planning guidance, spoiler alert, for Exec Away Day tomorrow, I'm going to propose a series of workshops with each service to say, what are you going to deliver next year, using the big changes that drive corporately on outpatients and theatres. So, for example, we know that we've got a lot of work to do on space in outpatients. Actually, how do we determine how services can come together and use their space better to do super clinics, which means, you know, you can see 50 patients with a reg and a therapist and a consultant, as opposed to all individual clinic rooms dotted around the organisation. So I think we've got to think of it as they're not relevant and important change programmes that will drive something. It's just that the determination of where the SIP is has got to be at service line level in their plan and their budget setting.
Jude, I think we're on to Rafiq and then Joe, please.
Thank you, Chair. So I just wanted to pick up first on Owen's comments about the medical workforce program. I think it's fair that that program is definitely not where we want it to be and requires a bit more focus. And we're working on a bit of a reset there. There's work to do. It does have significant potential in that space for producing savings and efficiencies in terms of how we use our medical colleagues' time. Linking it to the capacity point that Owen makes, one of my big concerns is we've actually reduced the program management support to this program, which we're identifying as one of the programs that we don't feel has progressed in the way that it has. So that's something that outside of what we should be having discussion about and making sure that we address. My final comment relates to big programs versus small programs, and just reflecting on the experience of working through clinical leadership model and where we are. And that, when enacted in the right way, should be a platform that allows us to do the small stuff consistently well. So when Owen refers to, for example, some of the challenges we have in disseminating some of the changes across care organizations, that's the whole idea of trying to do things differently. And so while the program itself might not deliver a particular saving, I think that's something that we'll need to find out in due course. It does give us the platform to do the stuff that gives us the efficiencies that we need to take out of the organization.
Thank you so much for making that alignment, Rafiq. I was going to make the same point, because I think if we don't resource the medical workforce program appropriately, and it does places in difficulty regarding our capacity and our governance, and it will limit and undermine our portfolio's ability to meet our strategic objectives. I think there's that interrelationship, and that goes back to what the coherence report is also telling us. I'll say some more on that later on. Joe, and then Gertie, please.
Yeah, just to respond to the scale of programs, really, just to develop something on the back of what Owen and Sue had said. I'd also have to say I defer to what Louise says about the medical workforce program, but having sat on the program board this week, I wouldn't put program management as the top of the issues in that program. I think there are other things we need to tackle. Well, I don't see it as a limiting factor at the moment from the evidence that I could see. I just wanted to quickly refer, and apologies, some colleagues will groan at this. In 15.2, page 6, there's the programme scope, and we've been talking about the portfolio scope, for around a year now. and is it the appropriate scope? And this comes back to this point about programs and how the CIP is developed for next year. So we've got the 4 boulders at the top that people are familiar with: the CLM, maternity, electronic patient record, and FSP. And with apologies for a football analogy, if you put FSP in goal, because FSP is just a repository for 10 programs, then the 10 green programs on there are effectively the team. And it's a 4-3-3 with apologies. And the 4 at the back are what I would call kind of logistical supporting things that allow healthcare delivery. And that's meds management, procurement, estates and facilities, and digital. And the reason I mention them is probably all colleagues are familiar with the fact that those do tend to be at least medium-sized programs. And the professionals in those disciplines, actually their kind of professional part of their professional lives is consecrated to delivery of efficiencies and savings. So year on year, I think we should be looking to those, and Nicola and I in meetings with them every week have those conversations, looking to them to deliver substantial programs of savings. So to Sue's point, that's one area where you'd be looking for maybe up to, and these aren't nailed on figures yet by any means, but you'd be looking at a potentiality up to 20 million in those big 4 disciplines: digital, E&F, procurement, meds management. Then if you go to a midfield of 3, that's where you've got the workforce then. And that's the nursing and AHP, medical workforce, and what has been called corporate Tom, but let's say the corporate workforce. And that's where NCA spends over £1 billion of its budget is on the people that the colleagues it employs. And so those are areas where if you're aiming at 5% efficiencies year on year, you can't ignore that you have to look into, and you have to change things in those areas. And then up front, we've got productivity, which is what the umbrella term has been clinical services efficiency. And those are your big areas of activity: theatres, outpatients, UEC. So what I just wanted to mention that today and use this discussion as a segue to just get us all in a place where these 10 programs that comprise the FSP are unavoidable if NCA is to deliver the FSP, because these are where you spend your money. And these are the areas where we're going to find savings. So back 4, reliable; midfield, work to do; up front, work to do. And so that's why then it's really important to recognise the amazing shift that's been happening in your care organisations and what they've achieved over the last 12 months, because that's a genuine cultural behavioural shift where people are thinking consciously every day, every week, to that drumbeat: how can we be more efficient? Where could we just use a little bit less resource but still achieve the same quality? So, and that's the 60 million. So again, back to Sue's point, 20 million from the back 4, 60 million from care orgs, and the whole cultural focus on efficiency, that gets you to 80. Then you can start to build the programs from there, which we need to do. And we need to be able to achieve transformation, and that then de-risks. The bigger those programs get, you de-risk the whole deal. So that's where I would see 25, 26 panning out. As Owen says, one has to keep a weather eye then on what's that potentiality in the care orgs, and eventually that will start to wane. So hope that's been helpful. Thank you.
Very helpful, Jerry. Remembering reframing.
I'm sorry, Rubina, I can't hear you, but it could be me.
I don't know what's wrong with my system. So you can obviously hear I'm trying to set my settings to improve my volume, but I can't do it on the side. I have no control of this Teams thing. Unless Lisa can do something. Can you not hear me at all? If I raise my voice, I'm shouting.
We can, Rubina, hear you very clearly now. I think when you sat very close to your device, it seems clearer.
Yeah.
Problem is, I'm almost eating my device because I'm so used to it. Okay, I will endeavour to do my best. Thank you. Can we move then to Gertie and to Sue, please, for further comments?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And I think my comment is more around sort of the differential between big programmes and the less sexy programmes. And I'm going to shamelessly bring this back to our people and our colleagues. You know, Rafiq will always say to us, don't pin everything on CLM, but one of the most important parts of CLM is that programme of work around how we equip and enable our leaders and our managers to actually create the right environment. So, you know, I don't know how you put that into a football term, Joe, but it's that bit. You know, we had a very, you know, get the basics right conversation earlier about the concerns to the People and Education Committee about not having the welcome back return to work interviews being done. And I don't know any way to put glitter or sequins on that to make it sexy, but making sure we absolutely get the basics right so our leaders and our managers create a fantastic environment for our colleagues to come into, actually massively shifts spend profile. It reduces sickness, it increases recruitment, increases retention. You know, we see that banking agency spend going down. So there's something really sexy for me about just making sure we have those basics in place and we relentlessly focus on them. And we will be hearing about the staff survey coming up through in future months. I mean, it's early feedback and so on yet. But, you know, we've seen that feedback through the past number of years that we need to make those basics, get those basics right so our colleagues have the best experience and can bring their best selves into work and that they feel they belong and are valued. Thank you, Chair.
No, and just to your point there, when we talk about interprofessional standards, that's being moulded within the clinical leadership model, that is the emphasis point. That's the game changer, actually. And that is what we need to not only acknowledge, but do further work on to bring everybody in that ownership phase that we're working on. So I think your points are really well made, Gertie. Thank you. Sue. Are you on mute, Sue?
Sorry. I was reflecting on something Joe said at the last Finance Committee, which was around making sure that all of the functions that we perform in the organisation are in support of that patient care and patient support effort, which is why we're all here, and that we may well have grown some functions and departments that are kind of nice to have, but not essential, and that we maybe really need to have a good hard look at all of the things we do and why we're doing them, and are they really critical in a world where, you know, we're probably going to be getting less funding year on year. So I don't know whether that's another stream of, probably not a stream of change portfolio, but maybe something around a kind of zero-based budgeting exercise that it might be worth looking at some point.
That's a good observation. Perhaps we can look at that when we have our timeouts in February, when we're looking at the annual planning cycle, and maybe have a go at unpacking some of that. It's really helpful. Thank you. Are there any other observations or comments for Owen? I think we've covered the paper quite comprehensively, actually. Unless there are any, can we move to Louise for her reports? And can I just say, really welcome reading these reports. They're very comprehensive. They brought clarity as well as some challenges in our thinking about moving forward. But I feel, as everyone else, we're definitely on the right trajectory. It's just about retaining the focus and remembering where the improvements are happening and going back to where we can deliver benefits. Using the football analogy, Joe, I think was also very helpful in consolidating that thinking. So Louise, we're in your hands now, please.
Thanks, Chair. Hi, everybody. So I'll introduce the portfolio assurance report. That's item 15.2. In terms of the format of the report this month, so there's been no changes to the format of the report, and we've continued with the use of the movement arrows on the dashboard slide. So that's slide 14 of 46 in the pack. And then at a portfolio level, so slide 13 of 46, as usual, includes the graphs showing the trend of the overall governance and delivery assurance ratings. The total number of programmes in the portfolio this month continues to be 17, 14 of which are being assured. So from a governance perspective, so the graph on the left, We've got the same number of green RAG ratings as last month, so that's 5. And those programmes are maternity, medicines management, procurement, estates and facilities, and digital. But we've also had a decrease in the number of red RAG ratings from 5 to 3 with regards to governance. And the 3 programmes are clinical leadership model, urgent emergency care, and medical workforce. From a delivery perspective, so the graph on the right, the same number of green RAG ratings, so that's 6 programmes, maternity, medicines management, procurement, estates and facilities, digital and digital infrastructure remediation, and also the same number of red RAG ratings, again 6, clinical leadership model, outpatients, theatres, urgent emergency care, medical workforce, and the target operating model. As usual, the programmes with any red RAG ratings in them are highlighted in the Matters to Alert section of the AAA report, to direct attention to those that might require a little bit more scrutiny. And that very much aligns with the programmes highlighted by Owen in his summary of the AAA reports as well. So I'll just pause there and allow discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Louise. Again, very comprehensive and concise. Are there any questions or comments that are in addition to what we've already considered for Louise? Particularly related to those 6 programmes remained flagged as red that Louise has mentioned. Owen also mentioned them in his report. I think the fact that we're not asking questions is because you've been very comprehensive, and actually as the conversation has progressed, we've been able to identify some of these issues already and thought about them in context. So I gather there are no further questions or comments. So can we accept the reports both from Owen and from Louise? Colleagues, can you give me a thumbs up? And note the work that is going on and continues to go on to bring this together. It is absolutely the right model. And I appreciate your work, Louise, in guiding the principles that underpin this and the work of other colleagues who sit around it to ensure that we're meeting our trajectory. We recognise the challenges and the risks, but we expected some of them to take longer. And we've had an in-depth discussion about why that is. So thank you very much for your investment in time and for your leadership too. Right, okay, so we move then to Rafiq, please, the spinal patient safety report and report from BREEAM recommendation 16.1. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. So again, we'll take the report as read briefly in terms of context. Obviously, this is all the work that came out of our historical spinal safety issues and the BREEAM report, and the oversight group is looking specifically at the recommendations from the BREEAM report and to ensure that we are actioning those recommendations, and also that any further patients who come through with any concerns go through a similar process as we had for our spinal patient safety look-back review. In terms of alerting board, just a couple of things that are important to note. At the last board meeting, there was a very good discussion specifically around, if you like, a divergence between the amount of work that had happened and the depth of the work, and how it felt with the patient group and what they were hearing and what they were receiving. So that highlighted to us that the level of communication and engagement with them needs to improve, and we're taking steps to do that. There's a meeting with them that will include board members around the table to have discussions around the progress that's happening in February. So there's that, and also more communication going out from us to them. But that was sort of a very clear thing that came through despite the work that had happened so far. To try and facilitate some of the engagement and ensure that people don't get lost, we have a single point of contact. Now, one of the things that we've also realized is there needs to be a little bit of additional support, which Heather and her team have very kindly taken on to ensure that there is robustness within that provision. And there's some additional work that will need to happen from a governance perspective, which will come to the next meeting of the group. One of the actions that has come out of the group very clearly is the existence of more than one MDT for spinal cases. and the fact that that is causing a little bit of confusion from a governance perspective and is open to misuse. And so there's work going on now in the background that we're monitoring related to bringing those MDTs together into one coherent MDT. I'd like also to highlight to the board that there are a number of patients who have come forward, and we now have a total of 39 patients who have come forward since the publication of the BREEN reports. That is separate from the cohort that we have assessed as part of spinal patient safety look back review. And those 39 patients in the paper, you'll find a description of where we are with that. Of 39, 3 are very recent additions. So we were working with 36 until a small number of weeks ago. And of the original 36 that we were working with, there are 29 reviews that have now been completed, so a significant proportion of those. So we think that in terms of reviewing patients, roughly speaking, we will be within the 6-month timeline that we proposed for this work. There are 3 patients who we will not be able to review because of the lack of sufficient notes, and we have informed those patients of that challenge. So there's a small number of reviews that are outstanding, and we'll get an update on progress in January. That'll come to the next group meeting. And there are a couple of detailed reviews that are ongoing related to potential legal challenges, etc. So there are 2 reviews within that cohort that are just going to be of an added level of detail. And final thing to maybe just highlight is the fact that most patients have come through the single point of contact, but there has been one patient who has come through a regular consultation. They'd come in for a review for their ongoing clinical needs, and it had been picked up that there were some concerns about the care that they had received historically, and so they were channeled to the report. So just keeping in mind the fact that there are other routes that patients are coming through, so we just need to keep an eye on the progress there. And I will pause and take any questions.
Thank you very much, Rafiq. That was very comprehensive, and I appreciated your emphasis on some of those areas where we have, further work to do. And I'll mention those at the end. Before I do so, can I invite Jude to comment?
Yeah, it is genuinely a memory thing for me. Did we have a time scale against the actions in the BREEN report when we signed it off? Because what's not clear to me is, of the totality of those actions, how many of them have been delivered, are on track, or are delayed now? I genuinely can't remember.
So we didn't, when we agreed to set up the group, we didn't give a specific deadline for the actions. We did agree a rough six-month timeline for the reviews of patients, which is roughly on track. There is some additional work to do with some of the actions in terms of providing the assurance, because a lot of the actions are tied into other pieces of work. And the group's oversight role is to ensure that we are able to confirm that they have been completed as described and provide the assurance to the board. And that's what the governance comment in the alert section refers to, is that there is a little bit of additional work around governance and DATEX that needs to be closed off. And at the next meeting, we've also agreed that we will just do a bit of a check-in in terms of what timescales we feel would be reasonable for us to close off all of them.
Yeah, I'm glad you made that point, Jude, because I was going to make exactly the same point, that the governance action plan should include specific milestones and timelines to demonstrate progress, but also to provide that assurance. And I'm looking forward to the when that is going to be presented. Rafiq, do you have a timeline in place? Did you say you had a timeline?
The next meeting, which I think is February. Yeah.
Okay. Julie, and then Chris Harrison, please.
Thank you, Chair. I think a good point that Jude has made, and I did message, just sending Rafiq a Teams message just while you were talking. I think it would be helpful for the next board when we do the paper to set it out in terms of the actual recommendations. and then some of the actions that we've taken against those, because I do see that it's actually probably quite difficult to kind of go, well, was that recommendation, and what have we done with that? And I think that's only going to help us as well with the patient communications, because I think, yes, they want to know more. It's very challenging to kind of say, well, what are those things that we need to tell them, and for them to be consistent, clear messages. So I think it's a good point, and Rafiq, happy to help as well with that for the next meeting.
Thank you, Julie. It's really helpful. Chris, please.
Apologies if this question is off the mark, given that I've not been part of the board as this process has been developed. But as I understand it, Rafiq, most of the recommendations revolve around what you might call retrospective, what happened and level of harm. But I guess there's a couple of points in the paper that made me wonder what assurance we've got about the situation today. So, for example, the comment on multiple MDTs, it makes me think, well, are we today in a position where we're assured that patients are getting appropriate MDT discussion and treatment? I understand there's a lot of work focusing on what's happened in the past and supporting those patients and families who've been involved in that, but what's the position today, right now? Do we have any information on that, or am I asking a question that's been looked into several times?
No, I think it's a reasonable question. In brief, how I would describe it, Chris, is there were two big pieces of work that were done following the revelations of our historical spinal issues. One of them was the Spinal Patient Safety Look Back Review, which looks very specifically at the harm impact on groups of patients, identifying it, tackling it, being open, and where possible, rectifying it. So that is a piece of work that has been completed, and there are actions within that for particular patients that are sort of ongoing. The second piece of work was to try and identify where, as an organization, we went wrong and what fundamental issues we needed to fix. And so that was BREEN. So the BREEN recommendations more relate to ensuring that moving into the future, we can avoid this happening again. So it's more about a forward look rather than a backward look, where sometimes it can be a little bit confusing, and maybe we need to rectify how we just present the information, is the fact that following the publication of BREEN specifically, there are a number of patients who have then also come forward and said, on hearing that this is happening in the media, etc., well, I was treated by the relevant surgeon and want my care looked at. So that's the 39 cohort, part of whom came following Spinal Patient Safety Look Back and part following BREEN. So that is a retrospective look, and that's maybe where some of the confusion comes, that we're talking about looking at the historical care for those patients because they've come forward. But the specific work that the group is doing is looking at ensuring that we try and safeguard against this happening in the future through enacting those recommendations.
So it would seem that having a single MDT was sort of obvious thing that needs to be addressed.
But the single MDT wasn't a recommendation of BREEN. It came through some of the work that the oversight group had done and the discussions, and so it was followed, was identified, and will be actioned.
Sure, helpful, but I suppose there's a whole conversation about how there comes to be two MDTs, but nevertheless, that's what's being done. Okay, thank you. Thanks.
Thank you. So, colleagues, if I can draw this particular report to a conclusion. So we acknowledge the progress that's been made, Rafiq, and thank you for providing those further updates and clarity. We recognise that there are continued concerns, however, around enhancing our communication, and it's great that Julie's going to help with that. The governance clarity and the work that needs to be done to re-engage colleagues, that remains critical to fully implementing the recommendations from BREEN. And as you said, you're going to be providing further updates on progress and further clarity going forward. So we look forward to when those reports are brought to the board. So thank you for that very much. We move to charitable funds. Jeff, 1741.
I'll take the report as read. I just want to very briefly highlight two issues. There are no issues to alert the board, but under advise, I want to emphasise that the work to refresh the charity strategy is progressing, and a draft of the new strategy should come back to the committee and then to this board during the next cycle. And secondly, the committee considered an application for funding for an ultrasound machine at Oldham. The actual issue isn't the key point here. It revealed a wider question, that is that the committee is not getting information on whether equipment like this to be funded from the charity is in line with the wider clinical and managerial priorities for the trust. So we've asked for some work to be done to make sure that sort of information is provided to the committee in future. The issue about the charity funding for research is mentioned in the AAA report under the second bullet point of charitable funds requests. Under charity performance. But as I've said, I will chase that between now and the next meeting. Happy to take any questions. Chair, I should just say that as well as asking the board to note the report, there's a small amendment to the terms of reference for the committee to include the Chief Digital Information Officer as a member of the committee, and will ask me to approve that as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jeff. And again, I know that you're new to this role, but you did incredibly well in your leadership of the committee on our behalf. Can I move then? Can we accept the revised terms of reference first of all, colleagues? Thank you. And can we note the reports? I did want to, oh, Julie wants to come in. Julie?
Sorry, no, have I got my hand up?
You did have your hand. I don't know. It's okay.
Sorry, Chair. No, I've put my things in the chat.
No, it's just the final point on the updates to the risk register with those revised scores that you mentioned. That's, I think, it's going to be really important for our thinking, for particularly in the context of financial sustainability. And hopefully you could give us further updates about that too, Jeff. So thank you very much. Thank you, colleagues.